It's time for Twit, This Week in Tech. Evan Brown is here, formerly of This Week in Law. Larry Magid, CBS Radio. Carolina Milanese, lots to talk about. Apple's big announcements. Why did they put an iPhone chip in the new Mac Studio display? I'll never understand that. CNN starts streaming. Is that the place to get your news? In fact, where do people get news these days? And, of course, an Amazon Clubhouse contender. There's lots more to talk about. Stay here. Twit is next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 866, recorded Sunday, March 13th, 2022. Can't talk doing laundry. This Week in Tech is brought to you by Wealthfront. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed free for life, go to wealthfront.com/twit. And by Worldwide Technology and Checkpoint Software Technologies. When was the last time your company updated your security strategy? Are your business assets protected? WWT combines strategy and execution to secure your organization and drive business outcomes. Visit wwt.com/twit to get started. And by BetterHelp. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/twit. And by Mint Mobile. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2022, switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save this year. Get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free when you go to mintmobile.com/twit. It's time for Twit, This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. Got a great panel joining us. Former host of This Week in Law with Denise Howell. I didn't realize it's been so long since you've been on the show, Evan Brown. He was on Twit a couple of months ago, but you haven't been on This Week in Law in a long time.
I know, 2014.
Wow.
Time flies.
It really does. It really does fly. Anyway, welcome back. It's great to see you. I always wish I had legal advice during this show, so if you want to
do what I can today.
You whisper in my ear and say, you can take the fifth on this, Leo. You can. I will be glad to have that. Also with us, Larry Magid from connectsafely.org. You still do stuff on CBS, yes?
I still do stuff on CBS, yes.
Yeah. And
Connect week.
And Connect Safely is a great organization to help parents and children stay safe on the internet. Also joining us, the heart of tech, Carolina Milanese. It's good to see you, Carolina.
Grazie per avermi come ospite di domenica pomeriggio.
I'm going to melt. I'm going to melt right now.
I just did it for you.
Oh, I love that. I love Italian. I'm really jealous. Matthew Ingram is going to Perugia for the annual Journalist. Have you ever done that?
Oh, nice.
Have you ever done that Journalist concert? Perugia is beautiful, medieval city. In fact, my sister lived there for 6 months to study Italian. They have an Italian intensive program there.
They do, yeah. It is a beautiful city. Yeah. And obviously, gorgeous chocolate.
Oh, obviously.
Oh, now I'm sold.
Obviously. It's funny because the Germans fight over who has the best wurst. The Italians, the Belgian, the French, they fight over who has the best chocolate. I take the chocolate over the wurst.
Oh, we fight over everything.
Everything,
wine,
right.
Cheese.
Cheese. Who has the best cheese? I don't know. Let's try some more and find out. So Carolina was watching with interest. I saw your article as Apple unveiled new hardware on Tuesday. Don't worry, this is not going to be an all Apple show, but we have to mention it because I think Apple has really shown some real skill and leadership in the chip field. These Apple Silicon is just starting to lap the other guys in really remarkable ways. The M1 Ultra, even Apple was able to have a secret at this event. Actually, the Mac Studio was kind of a secret. In fact, if anything, this event showed that the rumor mongers can be very wrong. They were talking about a Mac Mini that had plexiglass top. They were talking about a 7K display, neither of which appeared. We knew there'd be a iPhone SE that was, pretty much, on schedule, the iPhone SE with 5G. And a chip equivalent to the current iPhone 13, a very powerful A15 chip. They announced an iPad Pro with the M1 chip. No, not Pro, iPad Air with the M1 chip, but verging on Pro territory. But the most interesting thing to me was this Apple Silicon in the Mac Studio. And what Apple, was it John Turnus or Johnny Cerrugi? I think it was John Turnus, Apple Senior Vice President for Hardware, said, we have one little thing we didn't tell anybody about with the M1 chip. It has a built-in interconnect. And as everybody predicted, the way Apple would move forward with their silicon, just as Intel and AMD have done, is to do multiple core architectures. But when you're doing multi-core architectures with the M1, each die has its own memory, its own AI processing, its own video processing, and they glue them together, and the interconnect is the fastest interconnect anybody's ever seen. So Apple has this really great story going forward. In fact, everybody predicts you got the Ultra, which is two of them stacked one on top of the other. It's just a matter of time before you have 4 or 8 or 16. The sky's the limit. Very impressive processor. The interconnect is 2.5 terabytes per second. Kind of mind-blowing. 800 gigabytes per second memory bandwidth, because remember, the memory is unified memory. It's on chip. Up to 64 cores on the CPU, on the GPU rather, a 20-core CPU, 32-core neural engine. But Carolina, you were most interested in the display.
Yeah, I was interested in, first of all, the range that they showed. I think it was the first event where we saw pretty much Apple addressing the whole user base that they have, right? From the creators and the really demanding users with the Mac Studio all the way down to DSE user who are the most pragmatic users that you could possibly have within the Apple ecosystem. And not only because of the size. I think a lot of times we get focusing on, how big is DSE. It's really about familiarity of things like Touch ID instead of using Face ID.
I have to say, when you look at it, it looks like an old phone. The Touch ID dates it. The big bezels date it a little bit. The rounded corners. It's the old design. Who wants Touch ID? What's the Touch ID?
I like Touch ID.
See?
I like it. I've got it on although I don't like the way Google implemented on the Pixel 6 with it on the screen.
Yeah, but the new Touch ID with the Samsung and the Google, that's all in-screen technology.
But a good look, I have an old, this is not the phone I use normally, but I have an old iPhone.
Look at that.
And this is, I think, the 6. I actually use it for specific apps. I don't even have a SIM card in it. But the point I'm making here is that I like the Touch ID because it's positive. It works well. It works virtually all the time. You don't have to worry about whether you got a face mask on. I know they're trying to fix all that, but I just prefer it.
Is that why this is still around, Carolina? Because face masks?
No, and Apple has already fixed that with the software in the phone, or if you have an Apple Watch, you can definitely open up your iPhone with a mask. Right. No, it is really about people that like what they know, and to Larry's point, he has a 6, and that's where the base is for the new SEs, the 6, the 7, and the 8 that have been around for so long, and also the fact that people that are a little bit more pragmatic and price sensitive don't want to pay for things that they're not actually using. And so getting to that, $400 price point with 5G, the fastest chipset, you're giving them a phone that is going to last them 4 or 5 years, which is normally the life of a cycle of a more pragmatic user. And for Apple is kind of a win, because that means that they can get, those users can get to appreciate all the new features, but more importantly, the services that Apple puts at their disposal. And that's what it is about, future-proofing your purchase as a consumer, and for Apple, making sure that they bring those consumers with them as they drive more and more services.
This is what happened I'm thinking back to the iPod. the initial iPods were targeted at a higher end market, but by the time the iPod had reached its full life cycle, there was an iPod for every pocketbook, every need, every desire. That's how you double down on a product that is so successful. There's none more successful than the iPhone.
Especially when you consider, they're selling razors and razor blades both at a profit. The idea that they're still making plenty of money on the SE. And to the point, if people sign up for Apple services, they're making money on an ongoing basis. So get an Apple in their product. And also, maybe they'll buy a Mac. Maybe they'll buy another iPhone later on. So it gets people into the ecosystem.
$450 is still expensive, but it's comparable with it's a mid-range price. They're $200 and less Android
I mean, there
phones.
are people who buy Androids at that price all the time. And if the only reason they're buying an Android is because they like the price point,
right,
Apple now has a competing product. And so I think that's,
and
again,
a better
smart
chip
move.
in it.
Yeah.
Usually on the Android devices at that price point, you do have somewhat of a compromise on the chipset that they use that to be honest, philosophically, on the Android side, there's a limit that the brands put on what they think those users want to do with their phones. Mm-hmm. And Apple is not doing that, right? It is giving them the best chip for now that they have so that they can do what they want to do. And, some of the advantages of having the 815 Bionic is obviously the camera and, doing more with just one lens.
This is a big problem in the Android world where you have a lot of phones that cannot be updated. You even can get brand new phones that aren't going to be guaranteed security updates next year. So it's a big
only
issue.
Android I only recommend Pixels. I mean, if you're going to buy an Android, I know a lot of people love Samsung, but if you're going to buy an Android, I really recommend a Pixel because you're going to get the latest software. You're going to get pure Android. It's the closest thing Google has to an iPhone. And I just think it runs circles around any competitor out there in the Android world.
Samsung, which is, I think, the biggest seller of smartphones in the world.
Probably is, yeah.
Has said we are going to guarantee.
After Huawei, yes.
Yeah, Huawei, in China.
Well, I'm saying after Huawei was cut off of Google, yes.
Right. They have said 4 years of guaranteed updates. So they are responding to that.
But how quickly will you get your update?
Right.
Will you get it day one like an iPhone user will?
That's an interesting point because I have the latest Samsung S22 Ultra and it still has the January security update. We're in March. Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. There's a little bit of it because they've so modified the OS and the apps that they have to do a lot of testing before they release that.
Right.
They are getting better though because they know that matters a lot, especially in the enterprise space where they are trying to get more aggressive to compete with Apple. So we should definitely see an improvement on the rollout. And they also differentiating less from a software. They're getting closer and closer to Google. So
less bloatware.
Yeah, they're even using Google's messages as their default messenger, which is a huge shift for Samsung.
But you asked me about the display, right?
Yes.
Because I thought that was interesting as I was listening to, the rollout of all the features. I was expecting something around $3,000. We know that the latest display that they launched a couple of years ago was $5,000. And I'm like, $3,000, with the brand of that. But they came out with a quite aggressive price point in my view, to be Apple and getting what you're getting with it of $1,600. And that made me really think about what Apple is changing is using silicon as a differentiator. So we've seen the M1 go into an iPad Air, honestly, not something that I was expecting. We've seen the A13 in the display to power some of these experiences like Center Stage. And so using silicon as a differentiator and then using a device like the display at a price point to appeal to a broader audience than not just the Mac Studio potential buyers, right? This is not just you buy the two because you're the most demanding users. This is for somebody that might have a MacBook, somebody that might have an iPad that wants not just a display. You can get cheaper display with similar features, but that end-to-end experience that you will get like Center Stage. And you can use it with a PC as well, but some of those experiences are not going to be there.
I think I was very puzzled by the fact that they put an A13 Bionic in a display. That is the iPhone 11's processor. That is a faster processor than they put in the Apple TV. And yes, I guess it powers, you can say, hey Siri on it, although it still requires a computer to respond. And yes, they have center stage on the camera so they can zoom and pan as you're on your Zoom call. But it doesn't, that seems like an awful lot to put an A13 in just for those things. So I'm wondering if there is something down the road that Apple wants to do with this display. I mean, it honestly could be an Apple TV. I don't know if they put enough memory and storage in there to be an Apple TV. Probably not. But it could be, or it could be a hub for your HomeKit. There's things you could do with that. You've put a lot of smarts into a monitor.
But it's becoming more important, right? We're doing this hours and hours of the day. And I do think that screens will become way more important in the future as we talk about ambient computing. And I agree with you. I think it could become a hub or, something around TV or maybe around some of the services like, what if you can run just on the display something like Apple Fitness Plus as an example, right?
The other reason they did it, of course, though, is because I think that this has proven the case as the week has gone by. They're going to phase out the big iMac, not just the iMac Pro, but just the 27-inch iMac, and for the same price, you're going to get a separate Mac Studio display, which when you put the Mac Studio on that special tray under the screen, it's very much like an iMac. It makes sense to me. It's an iMac deconstructed. This is actually what I was hoping Apple would do, and it was why I was going to buy a Mac Mini, because I want to have a choice of displays, a bigger choice than Apple can offer. And I have a lot of 5K iMacs and I have an iMac Pro, and I feel a little hobbled because it's not very upgradable. It's just what it is. And so I think
this Back to the Future, Leo? I think that was called a desktop PC at one point.
Yeah, it's kind of, but it's in a very Apple way. And by the way, I have to point out, and I don't know who did this. It's very funny. This is one of the publicity images they sent out, a creative person using, and this is the Mac Studio really is just a very fat Mac Mini, but the top half is really where the fans go. So I think what happened is they were trying to design it in the Mac Mini size, and they realized we got to cool this sucker, especially the Ultra. In fact, they have a copper cooling subsystem in this which makes it 2 pounds heavier for the Ultra. It's aluminum in the Mac M1 Mac Studio. But look carefully. I don't know if anybody picked up on this. At this plant in the background, it's in an old iMac. Can you see that? It's in the trash can iMac. She's turned it into a flower pot. Now, Apple has to have done that on purpose, right? Or was somebody punking them? Or maybe it just looks like but I'm pretty sure I think you can even see an Apple logo on there if you look really closely. So I'm pretty sure that's a trash can Mac in the background there. That's not news. It's just interesting. I honestly feel like this is my theory. There were two contingents in Apple during Johnny Ive's era. There was the Johnny Ive crew, wanted to be simpler, more beautiful. Their trash can Mac, a perfect example of that. The thinner and thinner MacBooks with the touch bar and the butterfly keyboard. That's the Johnny Ive crew. And then there was the functional crew who said, no, it doesn't matter. These are power tools. They should be more functional. And they won. Ive left. The trash can couldn't be upgraded. Apple had to hang its head in shame and say, yeah, we blew it. We can't upgrade this because the cooling design doesn't allow for it. They got rid of the touch bar. They got rid of the butterfly keyboard. These new MacBooks even have HDMI ports on them, which Johnny Ive must just be tearing his hair out. And I think this is a little shot. I hate to say it, but I think this is a little shot. This trash can Mac in the background, designed by Johnny Ive, is a little shot at that crew. I think they won. And they're basically saying,
there's another person in the background too. Unfortunately, very much in the background, Steve Jobs, who was so
he was design
about every little
centric.
He was a design fanatic.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure he would be in love with this new these new devices.
You know, you look at this fat boy, this thick Mac. It isn't the most salubrious design.
I don't think Steve Jobs would have loved it.
No, it's a little swole.
Yeah.
But it's purely functional. And it's got the ports on the back. I think the monitor has more ports. I think they have 4 Type-C ports, 1 Thunderbolt 4, 3 Type-C USB. I would like to see more, especially since it has an i13 in it. I feel like that monitor could be doing a lot more.
But the base is very different now.
This is the new keyboard too, which you, by the way, you pay, I don't know what it is, $50 more for the black keys.
I've never seen an Apple black keyboard.
This is new. That's new. That's they announced that as well. Wow. And of course, if you're really a style maven, you're going to want to pay the $50 extra to get the black keys.
Well, if you can afford to turn an iMac into a trash can, you can afford $50 for
a flower pot. Yeah.
Flower pot, yeah.
Probably doesn't make a very good flower pot, but I mean, who knows? Anyway, I ordered the high-end Mac Studio. It'll arrive on Friday. By the way, you got to order fast these days from Apple. I guess probably because of the chip shortage. They say, you could pre-order it right away. Before Tim Cook even left the stage, I was in the store. If you order today, you're going to be waiting till April 26th for the high end and April 5th for the M1 Pro. I'm sorry, M1 Max version of the Studio. So a lot of people, I've noticed a lot of edits putting that SD card slot under the Type-C to make a little face. I think Apple missed a bet there. They could have been cute. Could have been smiling.
You know what's funny about that? Well, if this were any other manufacturer of a computer, nobody would come up with that idea. Nobody would pay any attention to whether it's a face or not a face.
There's something about Apple people. They're just a little weird, a little different. Anyway, it is. If I were Intel, I would be a little bit nervous. Intel keeps saying, "Oh no, we can make chips that are that fast," but they use 5 times the amount of power. 5 times the heat, and you better not put them in a laptop or you're going to have a puddle of aluminum slag in your lap. This is just, I feel like just the beginning for the Apple Silicon. They're really, and they have such a huge advantage because the operating system is designed with the chip in mind and vice versa. This is essentially a Swift machine. Pretty amazing. It's a 5-nanometer process. That's the other thing Intel's had a little trouble doing.
Does it also give Apple some independence, in terms of I don't know where they're making these chips. I assume in China.
TSMC makes them.
So,
in Taiwan.
In Taiwan. Okay. Well, I'm wondering whether, if Apple is becoming more of a master of its own domain by not having to depend on other companies for, as many components, including obviously the vital components of the CPUs as other companies are having to do.
Yeah, actually, because of the geopolitical situation in the world these days, I think a lot of companies are really starting to say, chip shortage and so forth. Apple has already started encouraging TSMC is building a plant in the United States. They've started building plants in India and Brazil and other countries, Vietnam, I think. So I think there is definitely, this was Tim Cook's brilliant move early on, was to concentrate iPhone manufacture in China, get the skill set built up there. Really was a smart move to get TSMC to be the foundry because of the skill set TSMC built, they were able to build 5-nanometer chips long before Intel was. So that was a brilliant move, but there's a change.
So that's why Intel is investing so much in the U.S. and
Intel wants to be a foundry too. In fact, they want to supply Apple's chips.
Yep.
So it's
hey, Leo, before we move off of this, tell me about what kind of task would max out that spec.
Absolutely nothing. This is the funny thing. I ordered the Ultra. I will never see those chips go to 100% ever.
Especially that 2.5 terabyte transfer rate. I can't even comprehend what you need that for. What would
our Mac Break Weekly show? Alex Lindsay, I'm sure you know of him. Does stuff. There are applications. He does something called photogrammetry, which is 3D rendering of spaces, and you have many, many, many points. Photogrammetry is a very challenging way to do 3D modeling, And he has found models that are almost impossible to render, even on a high-end Intel Mac. So that's one thing, 3D modeling, video, 8K video editing. I mean, they always show somebody, I got 8K videos running at once. I don't know why you would really need to do that. Yeah, you can. If you're using Logic and you've got an orchestra and every instrument has its own track, I guess you could probably tap out the Ultra. What Alex says is it's about time. If you're a professional working in one of these fields, your time is extremely valuable. And so it's worth it to spend money on hardware that does stuff faster, that saves you money in the long run. So I think that's really it. And of course, there's people like idiots like me who just say, but I want the fastest, even though there's absolutely I'll never, my crossword puzzles are not going to challenge that M1 Ultra in any respect. I'm going to have to actually go.
Huh? Yeah, Wordle's tough.
Game?
Wordle, yeah, maybe. No.
That might help you.
I don't think so.
The fastest Wordle ever. Even a Rubik's Cube solver. No problem. Yeah, it's hard. There are specialties like data science, like AI, like video and 3D modeling. Those are real specialties. But in the past, those have been very high-end workstations you don't hear a lot about that people are buying.
Well, it reminds me of people who buy the version of the Tesla that can go 160 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly. A Plaid.
And like, on what road?
Right.
I mean, okay, yeah, I know there's
It's like owning a Lamborghini. Exactly.
Yeah.
And Apple's not, Apple's a very savvy marketing organization. They know that people will buy these. It also looks good for them because it reassures pros that Apple is still in this market.
Yeah.
It's been a little scary. I mean, the iPhone was so successful that I think a lot of Mac users were a little bit nervous that Apple would, just lose interest in the Mac. So this is a way to reassert their dominance in the field. I think it's interesting, Carolina, that you talk about the fact that these products are designed to reach a broad range of consumer price points, broad range of consumer needs. That's a smart thing to do for any technology company.
Absolutely. And the fact that you're adding device to device to deliver more value, that's always been Apple's game. But now that they have services, I said this at the end of my article, I think now with the services play, Apple can play more, no pun intended, with the price points of some of these devices to really hook people into their ecosystem even more than in the past.
Yeah. It's an excellent point. I can't think of another event where they've covered the very lowest end, the iPhone SE, all the way up to what is currently the very highest end.
Yeah.
I mean, these Mac Studio Ultras are actually faster than their Intel Mac Pros by a significant amount, almost twice as fast in some cases. That's a big jump in performance.
And what is fascinating is they can do that with their own silicon, right?
Yeah.
So they can play up and down with the silicon to address all these users and then use that for their services and their application and their ecosystem. It was, one of the big advantages of the design of the new chip is that for all terms and purposes for the developer, it is one chip. So you don't have to figure out how your app is going to run. And that's a huge advantage. Again, as I'm convinced that Apple has big aspirations for the enterprise market, which is why,
Really? Historically, very difficult for Apple.
Very true. It's a very different world, right? We are at the time where from a talent perspective, giving employees what they want is absolutely critical. And we just did a study at Creative Strategies, and there's no question that people do want Macs in the enterprise space.
BYOD hugely changed enterprise IT. People, because of the iPhone. Everybody wanted to bring an iPhone into the enterprise. But wait, we gave you a BlackBerry. I don't want a BlackBerry. So you think the same thing's going to happen on the desktop?
I think so, because with the M1 line, they can now make it much easier for IT decision maker to manage, deploy, especially from an application perspective, something that they've already been doing for iOS. And so, the way I talk about it is not so much the comparison between the Mac and the PC, but really the Mac and the iPhone and the iPad. So if you put it in those terms, it's much easier for an IT managers to understand that the lift that they have to make for their apps is going to be less. And I think that's the other part is like, all of this goodness is coming to something running on ARM that, we've been waiting and been telling people that was not going to happen. And it is.
Whoops. And Windows on ARM is still a pig.
Is it a factor that more people are working from home, and that when people are working from home, they want more choice?
Then they choose what they want. Yeah.
You pick what you want in your house.
Yeah.
It's not just that, though. Is going back and knowing that if you don't give people what they want, people are going to go somewhere else. I mean, the reality of the talent war is what it is. Is not, people sometimes think, well, everybody has a mortgage to pay, sure, but there's choices there. And I think with hybrid work and remote work, there's more choice for people, because I don't have to necessarily relocate to go and work for somebody else.
A couple of thoughts came to mind as we were talking about this. One, maybe that's why you put an A13 Bionic into the monitor, and now you can run iOS apps on your monitor. I don't know how you would do that or what that would mean. I don't know if they put memory and storage in there, but that's really weird. It is. They certainly were selling that as part of the benefits of macOS, is that you can run your the vast number of iOS apps.
Wouldn't you want?
Well, maybe they meant to. Maybe they wanted. Maybe that was it. Maybe they wanted to put a touchscreen in there. Maybe they will in the next generation. That's interesting.
It's about time.
I don't know. Apple has said for a long time they didn't want touchscreens, but at the same time, this is a new Apple. This is not Johnny Ive's Apple anymore.
Right.
I'm still skeptical of something like that, because you don't take, although I have a Surface Studio, which is an all-in-one design that, that tilts and you can use it to do inking and drawing and everything else. For the majority of people, if this is just a regular screen, so you don't have it close enough to you, it's just not practical. You're not going to stay all day with your hand like that, right? To do what you need to do.
Right.
I think it would make much more sense to have a MacBook, please, with a touch screen.
Yeah. I don't. It's interesting. It's a very clear line right now between the iPad line or the iOS line with touch and the desktop without touch. I wonder if that line is of benefit to Apple, so that they have a clear distinction between the two product lines. They are muddying things with the iPad Air. It's looking more like a Pro, so maybe they don't. I don't know. It's fascinating to watch. As Warren Buffett has said, it's a well-run company, so it's interesting to watch as they continue to strategize. It looks like almost perfectly to build their market. We're going to take a little break. We've got lots more to talk about. Carolina Milanese is here. She's Creative Strategies is your analyst business, yes? Mm-hmm. What's the heart of tech?
The heart of tech is helping companies. So it's still a consultancy business, but focused on ESG. And anything from diversity and inclusion to sustainability to social impact. Nice.
God, no, your timing's very good. Every company suddenly is trying to say, "What the hell do we keep people from quitting? What do we do?" It's great to have you. TheHeartOfTech.com. Larry Maggid's here. He is, of course, connecting safely, helping kids and families connect safely, connectsafely.org. That started as kind of like a passion project.
It did. Actually, it goes back to 1994 when I wrote Child Safety on the Information Highway.
Wow. For
the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Then I started SafeKids.com. And, the other thing is we've evolved. We started out around parents and kids, and that's our sweet spot. But we have an LGBTQ guide. We have a dating guide. We have 3 guides for seniors. So we're expanding way beyond families and kids these days.
Front page right now, how to talk with your kids about the war in Ukraine.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's hard to be a parent these days. I think that's great.
Hard to be a human being these days.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Evan Brown's a lawyer. He doesn't have to worry about that. Evan Brown, I'm just teasing. Just a joke.
Just rise above it.
Just rise above it. Evan.law. What kind at Internet Cases implies you do internet law?
Yeah, well, Internet Cases, what I used to blog at internetcases.com. Now, switch that over to evan.law. Internet Case is still my Twitter handle. So yeah, a lot of what I do touches on the internet by necessity. My elevator pitch is I do technology and intellectual property. So represent, a lot of software companies and companies in other industries bringing in a technology solution. So, contracts, intellectual property,
couldn't be
privacy.
a better time to do that, boy. Also,
it's been a wonderful run so far these 20 years, and every day gets more exciting, as we all know.
Well, what's interesting? I mean, you're in an area that is rapidly changing, and that the laws have not kept up with, and so it's really an interesting thing as we try to grapple with technology legislatively and legally, and so
there's always a tension, with innovation, people figuring out.
That's right.
To do new things. Well, what are the rules?
That's
and
right.
So, intellectually, it's very satisfying to, have the profession of thinking about these things and working with innovators and creative people. That's the real delight in what I do.
Great to have all three of you. Keith 512 in our chat room. Larry says he saw you on an old Computer Chronicles the other day. We old timers. Many of us still living down those early TV appearances.
Wait, you think the 286 chip is ever going to? Will we ever need something that powerful?
I am really grateful to be an old timer in this business because we have seen such changes. I mean, when you and I were starting out, this was a very small hobbyist business, hobbyist industry, and you had to go to a user group to figure out how to do this stuff. And software came in Ziploc bags, Xerox mimeographed pages. It's really changed dramatically in our lifetime, and it's fascinating to watch. And
the only reason I got any work going on is that I actually knew a teeny bit of technology and I knew how to write, and there was almost no one who could do both of those things.
Same thing. If you the combination of being able to talk in full sentences and knowing about technology is so rare.
Yeah, exactly. But they even hired you and me.
It gave us a huge opportunity. Yeah. Our show today, speaking of opportunities, brought to you by Wealthfront. A lot of investment apps make it easy to start trading. Maybe, I don't know, people like me say too easy. But just because it's easy doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Wealthfront's easy, makes it easy to invest, easy to grow your savings. They have a very popular app. So, it's got an app, 4.9 out of 5 stars in the Apple App Store. So you can start investing in no time if you want to use their classic portfolio. But you can also make it your own with things you care about. They have funds, look at that, cannabis, healthcare, socially responsible funds. That's my preference. If you want to invest in tech or crypto trusts. Yes, they have crypto trusts as well. Wealthfront was designed by financial experts to help you turn your interests, your good ideas into great investments, but you don't have to do it all yourself. For instance, if you don't want to spend hundreds of hours trying to lower your tax bill with tax loss harvesting, don't worry. If you don't know about rebalancing or you're not sure what rebalancing is, Wealthfront does that too, automatically, rebalancing your portfolio. This is why it's trusted with $28 billion in assets, 500,000 people building their wealth. Steady, solid investments. All you need, $500 to get started. Grow your wealth the easy way. Let Wealthfront do the work for you. You could do it right in the app, so you don't even have to put your phone down. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed free for life, go to wealthfront.com/twit. WEALTHFRONT. Wealthfront.com/twit. Start building your wealth today. It's easy. Wealthfront.com/twit. We thank them so much for supporting This Week in Tech. Please, you support us when you use that address. Don't, I know you're smart. You could just go to the App Store or go to wealthfront.com. But if you would, just do me a favor. Wealthfront.com/twit so they know you saw it here. Thank you, Wealthfront, for your support. Apple did not talk about new versions of macOS, new versions of iOS, new versions of iPadOS. All of those will be coming early next week. So there was, you know what? This was a case of Apple, a very tight 57-minute presentation. Not a lot of frills. In past years, Apple's remote presentations have had drone shots, and they were out in the desert or in the woods, and they had people coming through floors and through doors. And remember, there's a lot more production value into this. This one was very straightforward. It was just like boom, boom, boom. Maybe because of the amount of stuff they had to present, maybe they didn't want to distract from the very interesting stuff they were saying. Alex Lindsay on MacBreak Weekly thought it was maybe because they're going to stop doing remote events. They're going to start going back to in-person events, and they wanted to kind of ease you back in.
Ease people
back in. Not the most exciting production value, but really very exciting content. So pretty good. All right. Every show we've done in the last 3 weeks have been about Ukraine and about the war in Ukraine. There's a huge tech side to this. Evan, I'm sure you'll have lots of stuff to say about it. This is well, I think the first thing, we were talking about this on the radio show, I was very nervous. There's two things that make me nervous about this war with Ukraine. One is that it will heat up into World War III, and that is still a risk. Putin's a madman, and we don't know what he's going to do, whether he'll use tactical nuclear weapons or chemical warfare. And at what point do we say, all right, that's a bridge too far? I don't know. That's a terrifying prospect. But even more proximate, I thought, was the risk of cyber warfare. And that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Evan, why we haven't seen this hot cyber war or cold cyber war?
I suppose the easiest answer is that we've been prepared for it, that security professionals have been able to foresee it and stop attacks that have occurred. You only hear about the ones that are successful, at least
right.
in the mainstream media. We hear about those. But it could also be, and this is perhaps a bit more cynical, that there is a playbook of tactics, and as things deteriorate from Russia's perspective in the Ukraine, or as it gets more entrenched, or however you want to characterize that, it's deteriorating for everyone. Maybe there's more to come. But I would like to think that there have indeed been attacks, and that we've been well protected because we've thought it through, and we have smart people thinking about cybersecurity on a day-to-day basis down where the rubber meets the road. What do you think?
Russia in the early days before the war used Ukraine as a kind of testing ground, a proving ground for their attacks. They brought their power grid down for a few hours a couple of years ago. Just before the invasion began, they shut down the financial system. But in both cases, it only lasted a few hours. And I'm wondering if maybe Ukraine got the message and hardened its cyber defenses before the war began. That'd be my guess. I thought we were very vulnerable. The U.S. intelligence estimates 75% of all ransomware attacks come from Russia, either because they are tacitly supported by Russia or Russia's turning a blind eye to them. But I don't think it's an accident that 75% of all ransomware comes out of Russia, including, by the way, the Colonial Pipeline shutdown, which is a big infrastructure attack in the U.S. from a Russian hacking group called DarkSide. We don't know if Putin was behind that or just turned a blind eye to it. But, that I think in a way, in 2018, we founded CISA, which was all about infrastructure cyber defense in the United States, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And maybe they deserve some credit for doing a good job, as you said, Evan, and locking stuff down. Or maybe that mad dog hasn't been cornered quite enough to let loose the hounds of hacker hell.
I have a feeling that what you just said is more likely that they have an arsenal. And clearly, if you look at what's going on the ground in Ukraine or in the air in Ukraine, they have a lot of tools in their tool chest that they haven't brought out yet. So it would not surprise me if Russia has plans. Maybe we've hardened enough that they had to hold off on the plans, but I wouldn't breathe a sigh of relief anytime soon around cyber attacks in the U.S.
The other possibilities is it's the same thing that kept us from nuclear war for so many years, mutually assured destruction. I mean, they have their hackers, but we have ours.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe they're afraid of what we might do back. I don't know. Maybe they're more vulnerable.
Anonymous is already on the case. I don't know how they're doing, but
Yeah.
Supposedly
Anonymous.
going after Russia.
And it's interesting to see how everyday folks in Russia are already suffering in many of the ways that we would if there were a cyber attack that we can anticipate. For example, in the financial systems, if you can't get your money out of the bank, that's going to cause a real problem. That's going to have a ripple effect into so many areas. Well, you can turn on the news and see folks in everyday Russians trying to get money from the ATMs, particularly folks who have U.S. dollars.
So sad.
Yeah.
Well, you could have turned on the news last week. Now, if you turn on the news, we don't have any correspondents working at a Russia.
So we'll never know. Yeah.
So who knows what's going on there?
Although, we're seeing lots of videos, cell phone videos. The world has changed dramatically. And we're seeing lots of cell phone videos smuggled out of Russia by Russians who are against the war. I think we'll have boots on the ground sort of in Russia for some time to come.
There's some good Telegram channels too.
Telegram,
Still seeing some.
The thing that's maybe a piece of evidence, maybe not, Russia clearly was developing the ability to shut down the Ukrainian power grid. That they definitely were making efforts along that line. And I think they would if they could at this point. They tried to do it by bombing 2 nuclear plants, which is crazy. Very dangerous. If they had that cyber ability, I think they would have done it. And I think they must not have that ability, that somehow Ukraine has prepared itself. I hope so, too. A little different attacking the U.S. That might be a provocation that Russia is not yet ready to engage in.
And I think to your point.
Go ahead, Carolina.
Go ahead, Carolina. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point about, money, people struggling with money and everything, we have cut back on access to technology so much already, not just from a government perspective, but, tech has cut back in supplying, everything from chipset to memory to all the key ingredients, if you like, for them to be able to continue to operate in a manner. And then you have connectivity issues, and I think all of that puts them in a weaker spot when it comes to going and attacking somebody else from a cyber perspective.
It's early. It's too early to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I have high hopes. It's possible Russia could lose. That they actually could lose this. That Ukraine could triumph. I think it's looking more and more like that might happen.
I think
is that really a binary question, though?
Maybe not. I think what's pretty clear is that Putin is not going to stop. He's not going to say, "Oh yeah, let's have peace talks." Okay, fine. You can run your country the way you want to. I think the Russian bear has to be defeated. I don't think it's going to give up. But I think it's a possibility. And I think maybe Putin should be thinking about his own tail right now. You wrote a piece, Larry, on Connect Safely. Russian cyber attacks are possible. Yeah. Be prepared, but not panic. Now, you wrote that earlier this month. I don't know.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I think, the point we've been making is that I actually did expect to see something by now in the United States. And as I said, I'm not breathing any sighs of relief that we're not in the future. But I think what will happen is that people will be indirectly affected. And I took in this article, I kind of took the worst case scenario that maybe you should have some extra cash on hand because they could shut down the financial system. I don't say they will, but theoretically they could impact it. It's always a good idea to have extra food and extra water on hand. It's always a good idea to have ways of charging your smartphones and, the usual things. And by the way, everything that I said in this article applies to earthquakes, fires, any disaster, man-made or natural. So I'm not urging people, take any extraordinary precautions. I'm just saying that in a period of uncertainty, it's not a bad idea to have a few $100 if you can put that much together in a safe in your house. Not a bad idea. Batteries, a way to charge your cell phone from your car, et cetera, because it could happen. Probably won't, but it could happen.
The reason this is a tech story is because we are singularly more vulnerable because we are so reliant on tech. We've kind of put ourselves in this position, right?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, if you think about even, when Facebook goes down for 2 hours, it's a front page story.
Yeah.
And you know, what did we do 20 years ago when we didn't have Facebook? Well, we managed to survive, but tech has become a
very good point.
And one of the things that I'm very pleased about is that the cellular network is apparently working in Ukraine. I mean, I just saw today people being interviewed from their phones in Ukraine. So there is infrastructure, but it's all vulnerable. And if it goes down, those reports that we're getting are going to disappear along with it. So, you know, technology is our lifeline right now, both in the United States and still in Ukraine.
Nick Clegg, who is now the Minister for Propaganda, I'm sorry, the senior vice president at Meta in charge of global affairs, tweeted, responding to reports the Russian government is considering designating Meta as an extremist organization for its politics or policies in support of speech. By the way, I'm sure Nick Clegg just loves being able to say that. See, we're important. He says there's been a lot of coverage. I want to be clear. Our policies are focused on protecting people's right to speech. You know, this is really just taking it. This kind of annoys me. It really feels like taking a horrid situation and making public relations points out of it. We're only going to be. The fact is, if we applied our standard content policies without any adjustments, we would be now removing content from ordinary Ukrainians expressing their resistance and fury at the invading military forces, which would rightly be viewed as unacceptable. We're going to only apply this policy in Ukraine itself. We have no quarrel with the Russian people. There's no change at all in our policies on hate speech as far as Russian people are concerned. They're in a tough position. We will not tolerate Russophobia. There's a new word. Or any kind of discrimination, harassment, or violence towards Russians on our platform. Okay. I wouldn't want to be in.
It's a slippery slope, though, as well, right? Because
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from, but are you going to say the same thing when people here start to, make their voices heard about voting rights or the Say No Gay bill or anything else that's going on in this country?
Indeed. This really does touch on the heart of the problem of content moderation. And I see it as a danger of placing these sorts of powers in the hands of private industry, where there can be a model applied that differs from the standards and the analysis coming from those standards under the First Amendment or other free speech principles in other countries around the world. So it really does expose a weakness in the approach here, when I don't know that reasonable people could disagree that there is a certain amount of arbitrariness guiding these judgments, like, for example, what Facebook is making, allowing posts inciting violence, so long as it fits in categories that are defined, certainly using words here, but there always is a subjective amount of judgment as to where those contours of those categories lie. So this really is pointing out a weakness in the overall problem that we're seeing here.
Oh, I would not want to be in their shoes, that's for sure.
It's one of the reasons why Zuckerberg keeps talking about, he's talking about why he supports legislation, regulations. And I think part of it is they would like to get off the hook. I think that Facebook has gotten itself into a very tough position of being an arbiter of speech, where, and they know it's kind of above their pay grade. It is not something that private companies should do. Sure, they have a right to do it on their platform, but given the size of their platform and the power of their platform, should they have that right? Or should that right belong to somebody who's accountable to the people? But then you get to the question what that means and to what people. But it's a very tough situation. And I've talked to people at Facebook who really, you can say all you want about the negatives of Facebook, and there are plenty of good things to say about that. But there are people who are really struggling with these issues about which right do we enforce? Which right do we impinge on? And it's hard for a private company to do that. It's hard. Evan, you're a lawyer. You understand the complexities that our legal system deals with and why we have a Supreme Court, because these issues are hard even for learned judges.
I really like that you said that, Larry, because it really a platform is in a double bind, because you pointed out, and I think you made a very rational proposition that this ought to be done, or it may improve if it's done when there is accountability to the people. Well, who is it then that is responsible, usually, who plays that role of accountability to the people? Well, that's the government. So then what do we need to do then to ensure that there is appropriate application of the principles that the government is obligated to deal with, namely in the United States, the First Amendment? How do we do that in a way that is even-handed, fair? I would submit that there's probably not much more to do other than apply those First Amendment principles that have developed over the last 240 some years. So it's all a matter of bringing it in and contextualizing it and making it appropriate to where we are now. And I think we can be optimistic to think that there are approaches that are going to be viewpoint neutral, still protective of certain classes of people. For example, people who are the targets of violent threats or hate speech or defamation, those things that don't enjoy First Amendment protection. It's all a matter of figuring out how to do it. The first step is figuring out what principles ought to apply, but we can get there, I think.
But Evan, it's hard enough practicing law in one country. They're trying to do policy for almost 200 countries. Yeah. And how do they even begin to do that? I mean, not every country has a First Amendment.
Well, you could do what Mark Zuckerberg did. Mark and Cheryl said, "Hey, Nick, you handle that." And
you've got a foreign accent.
Nick Clegg kind of basically they handed him a shovel and they said, "See those stables? Have fun, Nick. We're going to stay over here. We're going to build the blue platform. We're going to run the operation." And Nick's in charge. Go talk to Nick. And now he's the poster boy for this.
Yeah.
I sure hope he gets plenty of money.
I hope he's getting a good salary. He's not a stranger to this former minister in the UK government. What about Gordon? Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say we can also be blind of the fact, in my opinion, that, talking about accountability, if you are a platform owner, you are accountable. And the only reason why Zuckerberg is saying we welcome legislations is because, one, he knows that by the time somebody's going to make a decision, it's going to be, we're right into the middle of the metaverse that people are still trying to figure out Facebook. And two, that he hopes that that legislation is going to be used against competitors and not just for Facebook,
what they call regulatory capture. Pull up the ladder behind you. We made it. We can do whatever they want.
I mean, big telecom has always benefited from regulations.
Yeah.
And there are reasons why big tech might as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about DuckDuckGo in a little bit, but we also need to take a break. Great panel. Evan Brown, Carolina Milanese, and Larry Magid all joining us to talk about the world around us. Our show today brought to you by Worldwide Technology and Checkpoint. If you want to talk about security, let's talk about it, because no matter whether it's the global political situation, war in Ukraine, hackers on your back door, we always have to be as secure as possible, especially in business. WWT is the best partner for any enterprise. They offer security solutions and services to protect your business. Remember, attackers are always updating their strategies, always finding new ways to attack. WWT is going to help your organization prepare for and combat next-generation threats. But to do that, you've got to have a company that has the vision, the services, the capabilities to deliver those security controls to reduce the risk for your organization. They've got their ears to the ground, their nose to the wind. They're prepared to protect you against all attacks, including future attacks. WWT's team provides resources and platforms to make it possible. They've been doing it for 3 decades, so they've got a proven track record, but they're also focused on the future, and they are very, very well aware of what's going on. I'll give you a few case studies you can think about. You'll find lots more at wwt.com/twit. They worked with a large healthcare organization. They were about to move to a certified electronic health record technology. That is hard all by itself. WWT was brought in to conduct a security risk assessment. WWT's experts came in and used expert knowledge, state-of-the-art tools, in-depth analysis. They even worked with the staff to do training and repetition. By the end of the assessment, of course, they'd made this healthcare organization confident. They also found that 90% of the vulnerabilities they'd found could simply be fixed by putting in a comprehensive, systematic approach for patching. And they did that. They implemented that, and they gave that healthcare organization, you'd know the name, a real sense of security going forward. They worked with a big retail bank. Again, you'd know the name, to help them achieve their goal of having an infrastructure that could survive a catastrophic cybersecurity event. Through infrastructure automation, ongoing cost savings, they also reduced system outages by 40%. Tangible results, not just the intangible, well, we think we're safe now. They made a big difference. WWT does it with a variety of security solutions: risk management, endpoint security, network security. They can help you with your identity and access management. That's really important, so that you know that, when somebody's accessing your resources, they're doing it. They're the right people doing it at the right time. That's super important. That zero knowledge architecture now is being adopted by some of the biggest tech companies. WWT can help you implement it in your own company. They also will help you with your cloud security, increase data protection, ensure compliance, and achieve a more consistent application of security policies. Even if you're multi-homed cloud, they can do it. They've got the skill. That's the idea. See how WWT and Checkpoint can protect your business assets and intellectual property with a holistic security approach. Go to wwt.com/twit to get started. Let worldwide technology help you at wwt.com/twit. Now more than ever, you need WWT to make that new world happen, and they're there for you. wwt.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support. DuckDuckGo got in a stew pot of trouble when their chief executive, Gabriel Weinberg, tweeted Thursday the search engine would rank websites, quote, associated with disinformation lower in search results. Not knock them off the internet, but just lower in search results. It's later come out they maybe didn't have that much choice because they rely on Microsoft Bing for their search results. I did not know that, but now I do. Huh. And Bing said that they were going to follow the European Union's order to restrict access to RT and Sputnik. What I was surprised is I thought, well, yeah, of course they're going to do that. I'm sure Google's doing it too. But I was surprised at the firestorm that generated. A libertarian YouTube user, Tarl Warwick, with 500,000 followers, said, if you're using DuckDuckGo, I suggest you stop using it and switch to something else. Breitbart, the right-wing news organization, said DuckDuckGo is adopting the censorship policies of big tech. And in social media channels devoted to conspiracy theories, users vowed to switch to Yandex, the Russian search engine. This is why when you say, we got a governmental solution and so forth, we are so divided as a nation that people would get upset with a search engine for saying, yeah, we're not going to include propaganda from a warmongering country in their search results, would upset people in the U.S. It's appropriate, is it not? I mean, maybe not.
Have you been watching Tucker Carlson lately?
No.
I mean,
what's he say?
Mainstreaming Russian propaganda. Oh, he's very clever.
Yeah.
We were watching him the night of the invasion, and he was on the air 2 or 3 hours before the invasion, going on and on about, oh, did Putin call you a racist? Did Putin steal your job? Why should you hate Putin? And then the invasion happens, and I say to my wife, I said, tomorrow night he's going to have to backpedal somewhat. He can't possibly keep this going. And sure enough, the next night he comes on the television and he says, yeah, I don't like what Putin did. But by the way, it's all because NATO is at Putin's doorstep. And he basically said,
it's justified.
Putin's tactics,
we did it.
We should give him what he wants.
Yeah.
And so,
stunning.
It's going on and on. So,
look, it's his right.
Yeah, he has a right.
I think, though, that it's also appropriate for big tech companies like DuckDuckGo to say, we want to curtail the spread of Russian propaganda. I don't know.
Right.
Is that wrong? Should a search engine be completely agnostic?
I will let other people speak. If you had asked me this 15 years ago, I probably would have said it was wrong because I was a free speech purist. And I think over time we have learned that just like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, just like you can't send out, pictures of sexually explicit pictures of children, there are certain limits to speech. And the old me never would have allowed the new me to get away with saying that. But I think history has proven that we have to have some, at least the private sector Public sector, different story. The First Amendment, as you know, applies to government.
Yeah, government cannot make a law.
Yeah. Right.
Abridging speech, but that's not what this is.
Private sector can do this. Yeah.
And all search engines make decisions all the time, editorial decisions about what content they rank highly and not. It's not like they took it off the internet. They just lowered the ranking. I don't know. That doesn't offend me. And I was very surprised to hear how upset people were. And it made me actually think, oh, maybe I do believe that search results should be completely agnostic. Evan, what do you think?
Well, I'm cautious in saying that there ought to be clear categories here for a search engine to deprioritize, especially when you hold the principles like what DuckDuckGo does, where it purports to be very neutral in this. I hear what you're saying, Leo. Search engines certainly, quote unquote, make decisions all the time about what content is there.
That's in the nature of a search engine.
Right. And I'm much more satisfied when that's done algorithmically based on certain things like, basic things that happen in the algorithm, like, well, how much is it linked to? What's its
the page rank and all that. Yeah, but at the same time, you might also deprecate sources. Google does it all the time. That's a spammy source, for instance.
Yeah. But there's a certain part of me that wants there to still remain with a certain sense of agency in the end user to be able to look at this content and evaluate its truth valence. For example, I'm a bit upset is way too strong of a word, but certainly disappointed to see that YouTube took RT offline. I was benefiting greatly learning about the contours of this dispute by watching RT.
Right.
I didn't believe most of what it was, but it helped me gain a robust, more deep understanding of the nature of the conflict. And now I'm not going to have
what the perspective in Russia is, what the Russian people are being told.
Yes.
And so you think that tech companies should trust. It's a little paternalistic to say, oh, we don't want to show you that information because we don't trust your ability to discriminate. So we're going to do it for you.
Yes. I'm eager to hear what Carolina has to say about this.
Well, no, I agree. I think is basically saying that readers cannot make up their mind as to what is true and what isn't. Now, we do also know that there are users who are maybe less in tuned with how the internet works, or that might be, and I'm not talking about the war here, but in general, that might be, they might need to be, safeguarded from some information. But, you can't always make the decision for them, because I agree. Otherwise, you create a bubble, right? And I think that in the tech sector, we are sometime, and I talk about from my experience, think about how you use Twitter, where you follow people that tend to be people that you agree with, people that share your likes and dislike, that, might be similarly politically inclined or whatever the case might be. You do end up in a bubble, and you don't understand what others are listening or hearing, and how they make up their reasoning. And I think that, to your point, Leo, earlier about the state this country is in right now, is that we're not really listening to each other anymore. And so having both sides of the equation, I think, is important.
I certainly wouldn't want Silicon Valley to be able to say, oh, look, our worldview, our global view is the only global view. Yeah. This is what you should. And so that's the risk of letting a tech company decide with their own agenda what we should be able to see and not. You can still go to rt.com, Evan, and watch the stuff there.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. So it really was more. Yeah. So if I do that, I can see it. If I go to YouTube, it says, But I think that's the point, I guess, is maybe YouTube was more paternalistic and didn't trust its audience. And maybe there's some case for that. It's funny because I'm sure YouTube would fight it if they were brought to, let's say, Congress to testify about their algorithm and its tendency to make people more extreme. They might say, oh, we don't have that kind of influence, but they still pull down RT.
And I would certainly be willing to stand up for YouTube and its prerogative is the word I'll use to do this. I don't want to say right because I think that's a bit too fundamental, but and that's enshrined, for example, in Section 230, where these platforms can make these editorial judgments for content that is unlawful, lewd, lascivious, or otherwise objectionable is the categories that are there in the statute. So I don't think there's anything unlawful about what YouTube did, and I don't think any of us are suggesting that as well. This is a much deeper, even deeper than what policy questions go. This is philosophical. This is whatever is at that layer. These are the kinds of perspectives I think we need to think about this far.
And I think it's important to try to get outside your bubble. I mean, I actually divide my television news viewing between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN because I want to hear the different perspectives. I want to hear what Tucker Carlson is saying. I want to hear what Fox. And by the way, Fox has some amazing journalists like Jennifer. Can't remember her last name, but she's
Jennifer Griffin.
Pentagon correspondent, is rock solid, and she'll argue with Carlson and Hannity. But my point is that it's important to get out that bubble, and I do want to see RT. I go to RT.com because I want to see that perspective. I go to Breitbart.com, and I think it's pretty probably obvious by now that these organizations don't reflect my worldview, but it's important, I think, to have a broader sense of what's going on. And one of the things that bothers me about modern media, including social media, is how people are being pushed into bubbles. They're being pushed into these very narrow tribes. And I think that's detrimental to intellectual curiosity as well as democracy.
Absolutely.
It's so hard to know where to draw the line. It is very tempting to be a little paternalistic and say, well, I know the difference. I can go to RT.com and I can tell that's propaganda, but I don't think we should let everybody do that. It's a little thorny. Like you, Larry, my initial feelings in the early days of the internet certainly was this is only beneficial for everybody to get every point of view, and you could trust them to decide and to use this information to make their own decision. And yes, we may not agree, but that's the nature of the world. And this is a great benefit to everybody to have every point of view. During World War II, you couldn't listen to Goebbels, broadcasts in Germany, but you could hear Tokyo Rose, and you weren't cut off from the German point of view or the Japanese point of view during the war. But at the same time, RT has a big fat pipeline right into the U.S. And they're very subtle, by the way. As I look at it, it's not obvious propaganda. Right?
You're right.
Yeah, they're very subtle.
But it's interesting, Vivek, that you talk about different point of views, because to the point of subtle versus not, we are still not necessarily, even for TV stations or newspapers, always getting everybody's point of view in as much as how the story is told, because you just need to see the difference that we're using to talk about the Ukraine and how people are fighting Russia and the invasion, and we speak very differently about other parts of the world where is the same situation, people fighting for their land to defend themselves and their loved one, but they so happen not to be in a country that matters more to the, peace in the world. In Europe, they might not have nuclear powers that are a concern for everybody else. And, they have, their skin is a different color. And so we treat them differently.
Yeah. I mean, this has been going on in Syria for a decade.
Absolutely. Yemen is another one, right?
Yeah.
We hear a lot about Syria, I think, in comparison to what happens in Africa. I imagine if you polled 100 Americans to tell you about the significance of the Second Congo War, very few of those 100 would be able to tell you even one fact about that. But it was an incredibly bloody conflict, and we just don't know about it,
right?
And there's
because there's no interest, right? From an oil perspective,
Ukraine is European.
Anything else?
Ukraine is European, and so we care about that. That's a little shameful. I agree. TikTok. TikTok. Let's talk a little bit about TikTok. You may remember last year under President Trump, there was pressure to sell TikTok to an American company. Oracle was in the bidding. In fact, Oracle was expected to win. That did not happen. When the Biden administration came in, it kind of drifted off the horizon. I wasn't so much concerned about Americans' data being held in China as I was about the incredible propaganda potentials for TikTok. Well, there's two stories this week that reflect both sides of that story. TikTok has moved ahead in its deal with Oracle for Oracle to store TikTok data about American users so that ByteDance's China parent can't access it. So in a way, that's that deal never did die. This is because CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, has continued without abatement to talk about its concerns over data security. So Oracle will be holding Americans' information in the United States in an Oracle database. And maybe that makes you feel better because China doesn't have access to your data. They still have access to whatever you do on your phone, which maybe is even more concern. My biggest concern, frankly, is that TikTok could be very easily algorithmically tuned in the same subtle way that RT is to become a propaganda platform for China. The White House, this actually was a Saturday Night Live skit last night. The White House, but it's a true story, brought TikTok stars in to talk about the war in Ukraine. Briefed them. Jennifer Psaki, the press secretary, briefed influencers about the United States' strategic goals in the region. No, my son was not included in that, although he had more followers than a lot of these TikTok influencers. I'm just saying, somebody recorded the call and you could listen in on it, and it was a fairly, it wasn't exactly a deep inside briefing, but I think it was very much an attempt by the Biden administration to get these TikTokers to espouse the American point of view on their channel. Khalil Green, 21, a creator with more than 534,000 followers on TikTok, said he wasn't surprised when an invitation arrived in his email inbox. This is from the Washington Post. People in my generation get all our information from TikTok. He said, it's the first place we're searching up new topics and learning about things. I guess you got to go where the kids are. I wonder if Jen Psaki said, hello, fellow kids. Some of the creators said it wasn't a lot of information in there. Jules Turpak, a Gen Z content creator who does essays about digital culture, said the White House decision to engage creators such as she was essential in helping to stop the spread of misinformation. Those who have an audience can ideally set the tone for how others decide to assess and amplify what they see online. I'll do the propaganda thing if you want me to. I don't know. What do you think of this? This is a story I would not have thought I'd be telling you about a year ago.
Well, there has been proof that in Europe, actually, that influencers were paid to distribute negative messages around vaccination, COVID vaccinations.
Right,
so,
right.
They can be used for propaganda. I'm not sure I agree that, kids go to TikTok to get all their information. I mean, there's a difference between, learning how to do a dance and, making a really tasty cheese toast than going and figuring out the war in Ukraine. But, maybe that's just me and my kid. I don't know.
Lev Parnas's 22-year-old son, Aaron Parnas, is actually one of the TikTokers who was invited to the talk. Now, you remember Lev Parnas is Ukrainian-born and businessman, associate of Rudy Giuliani's, helped Trump pressure Ukraine to investigate Biden and Hunter Biden. He was convicted in October on campaign finance charges. His son says, "I'm not my father." I love him, but I'm not my father. He apparently is posting a lot of information about nonstop news updates about Ukraine. He is, after all, Ukrainian by ancestry. On the night of Russia's invasion, he hosted TikTok live streams discussing the events to over 800,000 viewers. That's a much bigger audience than CNN or MSNBC.
Yeah.
Every day he's posted videos breaking down news about the war every 45 minutes. Interesting. A Ukrainian-born journalist who operates the TikTok channel Good Morning Bad News said he thought the overall tone of the briefing was too soft and officials dodged hard questions. The energy of the call felt like a press briefing for kindergartners. Well, I'm not surprised. But I think it's probably smart for the White House to do this. Yes, you agree?
Is it too little, too late? James Allen, who wrote, As a Man Thinketh, back in the early part of the 20th century. I mean, there was a passage there that says, a person who wants to, do well, shouldn't wrestle with opportunity, but must purify the heart. You need to come into these situations, challenging situations, having been fundamentally prepared rather than just figuring out at the last minute what to do. And so if we're sort of coaching TikTok publishers, or whatever we would call these content developers on TikTok, what our position is that really going to be effective? I would suggest that that's not nearly as effective as the results one would see from a greater focus, a greater love among our citizenry on our collective civic values. Now, only heaven knows really how we would agree on what those are, especially in this day and age. But things like a greater sense of patriotism, not nationalism, but patriotism, a more robust sense of our history, a well-fortified sense of what our position in this global conflict is based on, where we come from as a nation historically in all of these things. Now, I recognize it's a different challenge, and I don't want anybody to be hearing what I'm not saying, where one has to espouse sort of a radical America First agenda. But the point I'm trying to make is, ought there not be more done beforehand, before it gets to this point of having to just educate the TikTok crowd? In the IRC, there's been some discussion about, the importance of educating our youngsters to recognize logical fallacies and, to be able to think well. So it's things like that certainly this briefing is a good thing in principle, as long as it's a good thing in principle. Let's hope that it's done well.
Yeah.
I think it's a reflection of the reality that, the gatekeepers are no longer the gatekeepers. I mean, I grew up at a time when we had 3 television networks and every city had maybe 2 newspapers, and there was Time and Newsweek and a handful of important national publications. And clearly we're at a point where one can become a major influencer today with, as Leo pointed out, perhaps more viewers than CNN without having gone through any hurdles at all, without having any senior editor having anointed them or hired them, as happened with me early in my career when I got my first job at the LA Times. I mean, so the White House has to grapple with that. They have to come to the realization that you can't just have regular press briefings with accredited reporters. You've got to reach out to these people who collectively may have more influence than the people who are sitting in that press room.
Taylor Lawrence's article quotes Ellie Zeiler, an 18-year-old TikTok star with, stand back, 10.5 million followers. She sees herself as a voice for young people and the growing contingent of news consumers getting information through social media platforms. I'm here to relay the information in a more digestible manner to my followers, she said. I would consider myself a White House correspondent for Gen Z. And at first I mocked that, but you know what? That's exactly what she is.
She has more viewers than many White House correspondents do.
Yeah.
Many, yeah.
Absolutely. So, I'm sorry, Carolina, go ahead.
I was just going to say, nobody's actually asking the question of why this is happening, right? So we're going to try and manage creators on social media, but we are not wondering why people are turning to other channels to get their news.
Yeah.
And we are not doing anything to actually make those news channels. Because I mean, obviously I'm European. I am, and not just European, but I'm Italian. You know, television in Italy is not one of the best things. Then I spent 18 years in the UK, and, you know, love it or hate it, there is the BBC, everything. You know, I don't think that any channel in the world is not influenced by politics in one way or another. Some is more obvious, some are less. But the way that news are done in Europe is really more about the news, but not the commentary. And that's what I'm struggling in this country. There seems like a lot. And I, you know, there are channels that are not quite to that extreme, but there's a lot of opinion that come with the news.
More and more. That's what gets ratings.
Absolutely.
And ratings are everything in broadcast mainstream media. So yes, that's the strong tendency.
So I totally agree with Larry about training and what you've been through. But then if that gets thrown out the window because there are other things at play, like ratings, like funding, like advertising, like everything else, then does your training really matter, right? If what you're saying is changed and manipulated by other factors, and people are turning to normal humans because they think that these people are more truthful or closer to the way that they see things, I don't know.
Some ways, I think my training is counterproductive in the sense that, you know, I haven't learned clickbait. I haven't learned how to sensationalize. I've just learned how to tell things the way I think they are.
We have to write an article for Larry.
10
things you need to know before you start writing a blog post. You need a listicle.
Number 6 will blow you away.
It will blow you away. You won't believe number 7.
I'll read that.
10 things Larry Magid never knew about writing a blog post.
Exactly.
No, you're right. You're ill-trained for this stuff. I have to say, I would say most of the young people I know get their news and information not from TikTok, which is really short form, but from YouTube. But there's a lot of very good, your kid's the same, a lot of really strong content on YouTube. And if you know the right person to follow, not PewDiePie, maybe even not Mr. Beast, but there are some really quality history and news, science channels on YouTube. And I think what I observe is people find the one that they really, and they're devoted. They very much pay attention to that. Watch it much more than they would watch television, for sure.
And there's a handful of publishers on YouTube that I really enjoy because of their depth of content. And what really draws me to them is that I feel like I'm being told the truth. I mean, and maybe I'm belaboring the obvious in a way that's not really helpful here, but I suspect that that's something that is attractive to younger folks who are going to TikTok to find their information.
It's not corporate media. It's not corporate media. And
it's just the veneer, or it's the removal of the veneer of that corporate media, and it's really and we are enabled by these technologies and these means of communication to have that now more than ever. I mean, just it's so amazing to think about how different this is than how even the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the first Gulf War, going all the way back, Vietnam, World War II. Korea, I mean, it's amazing how much more information there is in real time that comes in high resolution. I mean, my favorite source of information, and this is just to I'm speaking in the extreme to demonstrate the point here. The information I trust the most is the guy that I know just from being following him on Instagram over the years because we both like fountain pens. He's a lawyer in Dnipro, and he's the one that's just southeast of Kiev. That's where I want to get information. I'm certainly going to trust that more even than the most embedded journalist who's going to speak to me in the Larry Magid kind of way of not sensationalizing.
And yet there isn't, and Larry and I both come from that, the older generation, that tradition of journalistic integrity. There's not that understanding of the rules of the road and all of that stuff, or even just the who, what, where, when, why. I think that's on one hand, it just as you say, Evan, that is the beauty of it. It's not that polished stuff. But I also think you don't necessarily know as you watch somebody on YouTube, if they have an axe to grind, if they have an interest in this, and disclosure is non-existent, I don't know. Yeah. I'm very torn. I don't want to be the old guy who says, "Oh, you got to do it." Clearly, the forms of journalism are pretty much dead, and YouTube is the perfect example of this. And it's also clear that anybody under 25 is getting most of their journalism from YouTube, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, it means it can anybody who has something compelling to say and knows how to present it has a voice. But it's also very easy to get as we've seen, sold down the river on that stuff too. I don't know.
Back again, not to beat a dead and very old horse, but I mean, I grew up at a time when we had 12 TV channels. The dial literally had 12 options on it. I think it went from channel 2 to channel 13, right?
And most of them were empty. Yes.
Yeah, most of them were empty. But I was in LA, so I actually had a lot of stations.
Oh, okay.
But it was really easy. So like when you're talking about this, I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to know who these great YouTube broadcasters are.
Hard to find them. That's right.
I'm missing out on some of them, I guess.
But you they don't have any hierarchy. So the other thing that happened is newspapers, television, there was a hierarchy of editorial people. I mean, not always, by the way, a good thing. Because at the top of the hierarchy was the guy who owned the transmitter, an old white guy. But there were some checks and balances. But at the same time, 12 channels is not enough to express the broad variety of things in the world. And
I'm not saying I want to go back to those days, but I'm saying I would like personally to know who these great YouTube broadcasters are. How can people find, because there's so much crap. If you just go randomly looking on YouTube, you're going to go down all sorts of rabbit holes. So how can people out in the audience who are listening to us right now find
how do you vet
a collection of people who they should be following?
Yeah. What does your child do, Carolina? Do they have some metric that they use, or they just watch whatever?
Well, I don't know that they have a metric as such, but obviously finding somebody that they can relate to, either because of interest or because of who they are, is absolutely critical. And I think that, we going back to that diversity topic that, we discussed earlier about the ability of seeing somebody that looks like you, that you might think has gone through what you're going through, or might see what is happening in a similar way that you do because of the experience, not because you think alike, but because you had similar experiences. So I know that matters a lot to them. I also know that both Dad and I keep on telling them to check their sources.
Yeah.
We are not, my husband would like me to police more than I do. I think I'm, even if I'm in tech, I would kind of be defeated at doing that because they are way ahead of me. And that is sad for somebody who covers tech to admit that.
They're going to just say, yeah, Mom, right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Whatever you say.
And so it's just, like Larry was saying earlier, and what he's doing with his work is giving them the tool to be as smart as they can, right? In terms of being able to check their sources, to go and fact check these people and what they're saying, and not just taking it in. And that's true with everything. I mean, that is true as well when you read textbook that that are used in school, to know who wrote that book, what story are you being told, because we know that it's not all the different opinions and different aspects of somebody, and a character or a fact in history that you're telling, because is whoever is the point of view of whoever wrote that book, and then the teacher who tells you.
It's even true with tech reviews. I mean, there was a time when there was Leo, John Dvorak, Walt Mossberg, myself, and about a dozen other people who were writing about technology. And, you could love us or hate us, agree or disagree, but you kind of knew who we were and who we worked for and who was paying us. Now there are thousands and thousands of tech bloggers out there that are recommending products day in and day out. And I have no idea who these people are and who's paying them and why they're writing about what they're writing. And so, even something as silly as what smartwatch to buy, it's hard to figure out a credible source. I mean, there are credible sources, but it's hard to know if what you happen to be watching is credible.
Well, it's interesting because in the creator world, I think especially YouTube, the people that do great work go to kind of extend to really explain, the posts that are sponsored, the posts that are not. And, I did an interview at the end of last year with Justine and her sister. I looked at, I've been following Justine, bless her, Justine, for a long time. And I like everything about them. And I wrote this story in the spirit of Women History Month. And because it's a story of sisters working together and lifting each other up. And also a story of a younger generation compared to mine, where they didn't think about themselves as women in tech or women as a creator in the YouTube world. And they do great work. And we were talking about exactly what you're talking about, Larry, about who pays you. How can you be as transparent as possible with the content that you put out there so people know? And it was fascinating because she was saying that now when she's actually asked to showcase a product, she will never call that a review because it's not, right? Because they are paid to showcase a product versus she's taking a product and she is reviewing. All that said, I always remember writing, I was still at Gartner and I wrote a review of an iPhone, and a customer asked who paid for that iPhone. Right. And I said, man, if I was so cheap that, whatever, $800 or whatever would buy me a favorite review, why would I be, what am I doing at Gartner? And there are people like that just because of a business model might question your ethics. And I also think that that's not necessarily the right way to go compared to, okay, because you write for AP, you don't have a point of view, or you're not, we're, especially in tech, we all human. We are, we like some brands better than others and all of that. And I think as long as you're transparent, more power to you.
Yeah, we threw out, though, the notion that any of these people in the good old days were independent or, had journalistic ethics. I think we've learned that everybody has a point of view. And now it's just a free-for-all. I mean, you see YouTubers who have investments in not merely given money, but have investments in the companies they're covering. And the FTC has rules, by the way, disclosure rules.
There are rules, yeah. Even to take products, you're supposed to disclose.
Yeah,
if they
I don't know
product.
how. I think that's probably reserved more in the breach than it is in the reality. But there are supposedly rules. Now CNN says we're going to start streaming. CNN Plus starts streaming in a couple of weeks, $6 a month. Although if you sign up early, you can get it for less. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, this is the old school journalists saying, let us in. Does streaming change the equation? I think it's still CNN.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's not the medium, it's the quality of the content and who's going to show up. Just because you serve it to me in a different way.
Maybe this is their chance just to free the chains that bind them to cable companies, which is
I was going to think that,
not a very good deal.
That's a good point. I wonder if you subscribe, if you'll also still get the regular CNN independent of cable in addition to the CNN Plus content.
Right.
I don't know if I want to hear Anderson Cooper talk about parenting, which is what his new show is going to be about. But right now I'm paying Comcast a lot of money to hear the likes of Anderson Cooper.
Right.
And others.
And in fact, that's the other thing is a lot of these people, including many of my peers, are moving to YouTube saying, oh, well, we're just going to do the YouTube thing.
Yeah, and, but isn't it basically just another? Isn't it just?
It's just another delivery medium.
Google instead of Comcast.
It's not the same. Yeah.
Is it? Go ahead, Leo.
Well, so go ahead. What do you think? It's a little different because you're not being paid by a company to do it?
Well, here's how I'd answer that question and sort of ask if you think that I'm thinking about this appropriately. I can't help but go back, I think it was maybe 2004, 2005, 2006, Chris Anderson's book, The Long Tail.
Yes,
I think that was more of
right.
an economic thesis where, you've got the main providers, the big networks. The fact that always comes to my mind is like, back in the 50s on any given night, whichever night I Love Lucy was on, like a disproportionate amount or a huge proportion of the amount of was watching. Now we're all sliced up and watching stuff. And so is it valid to think of Chris Anderson's model as rather prescient on how it's come? A lot of this has come to pass, and there are perhaps issues that weren't. After this show, I'm going to go pull that off of the shelf and thumb through it and revisit it. It's interesting to see. And sort of what made me think of this is a big player like CNN, an incumbent. I don't know if that's the right clinical term or whatever for all of this, but one of those big, at the head of the long tail, now trying to get into sort of the space where the streamers and everybody else is occupying the longer portion of the tail. I'm just sort of setting that out there as a paradigm, wondering how valid that is, how helpful it is for us to categorize. I think
Chris's book comes from that utopian vision of the internet we all had some years ago, and that is certainly accurate. That the long tail brings you a much broader variety of content. That's what YouTube is. I've lived in the long tail for the last 15 years, and probably for my whole career, actually. And that's where you get a much broader variety of content. But I don't have the same techno-utopian point of view that it's all going to be flowers and daisies from now on because everybody gets a voice. That hasn't really turned out to be accurate either.
It goes back to the issues we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Who gets the voice? Who has the right to silence?
Everybody should have a voice, and that's the beauty of the long tail. Everybody can have a voice, but I don't know. I don't know if it's worked out. So I think this is the way it is. So whether we like it or not, the future of media is much more like YouTube than is like CNN. And we're going to have to live with that. And I don't think any attempt to say, oh, you people are too stupid to watch all these videos, we really have to watch what we tell you to watch, I don't think that's going to work.
It's not going to work. But on the other hand, the New York Times, the Washington Post are doing pretty well right now. And one of the reasons is I think that millions of people trust the editors who make the decisions as to what they cover. And I think there is still
I don't think they'll go away.
Smart editors.
Yeah, I don't think they'll go away. I think there's a place for them. It's not going to eliminate the New York Times, but it has eliminated a lot of local newspapers.
Local papers are in trouble, yeah.
Yeah. The New York Times' success, it is thought by many, comes from the fact that they have such a variety of things that it's a multiple subscription. You might like the cooking. You might like the crosswords. It's not just about news. And that's how the New York Times has managed to make it in a very difficult world for journalism. I don't know. I agree with you. I mean, that's why I buy the New York Times and the Washington Post and a bunch of other news sources that I trust. I pay the subscription for them, including something like The Information, an upstart like The Information, because I know that that's going to be a good source of information. But again, I think if you're under 25, you're not paying, $100 a year to get the New York Times.
Right. And that's the other problem, right? Is what can you afford versus what is available to you? And it's not a question just, should you have to pay for better information, reliable information? And I'm not, questioning and saying that, all newspapers should be free. But, I think is an interesting question. And you've seen models like The Guardian in the UK, right, that really struggle to stay independent. And they had to ask for, funding from the readers and to stay afloat.
It's a really important question. I mean, I would hate to think that only rich people can afford good information. That would be a horrible.
Exactly
that
right.
would be very bad. Yeah.
There's clear.
If I add up,
you know who really dominates? Who dominates honestly and probably will continue to dominate? I'm pulling out my Samsung phone, and if you slide it to the right, there's a list of stories that Google picks. That's probably the most important front page in America. Is the whatever that news page is on your smartphone. That's because who has time to go watch 20 videos and hear a bunch of different points of view? You scan it. It's a scanner. It's a scanning thing. And the people who choose it are really the aggregators like Google.
Yeah.
I think that's really where power lies at this point.
It's funny because I got a Windows PC, and I just left the defaults. I went into
Microsoft News is terrible.
And I kept Microsoft News. It's like clickbait news.
It's all clickbait. Yeah.
And it goes by really quickly, and inevitably I'll see a story I'm interested in. By the time I want to click on it, it's gone, and then I have to go watch it again.
Paul bemoans that constantly. Paul Thurrott on our Windows Weekly show. Apple News isn't much better. These platforms have a huge responsibility. These aggregators are the front page of the internet now, and they have a huge responsibility, and they ought to take it more seriously. Now, this is on a Google phone. Most Android phones, you have that kind of newsy page, usually produced by Google. In this case, it's by Google. Sometimes it's by Samsung. They don't have something like that on the iPhone. So I don't know what people do on the iPhone. Maybe it's Apple News. Do you have a news? iPhone users, do you have a news button on your front page that you always go to? How do you do that on the iPhone?
I don't. I mean, Twitter is my morning catch-up news.
There you go. Twitter.
To be honest.
Yeah. For a lot of tech journalists, tech people, Twitter is the front page. Yeah. Huge responsibility. Actually, that's why Twitter Blue has that top articles section now.
Yeah, which is
I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting we talk about this because it's going to go on a thing, but I find it interesting, Leo. You talk about this responsibility, and Carolina, you were talking about responsibility before, as if it's a foregone conclusion that these platforms have a responsibility. I think it's edifying for us to all at the appropriate time to consider, what is the origin and the nature of that responsibility, and on what standards is the quality of the fulfillment of that responsibility judged?
Yeah,
I don't think the answers are easy.
These guys carry more weight than the New York Times editorial board ever did. They are choosing the front page. What stories you
think about broadcast? I mean, back to Evan's question. I mean, in broadcast, an FCC license meant that you had to present the news, right? If you were CBS, ABC, NBC, you were obligated by government, for that free airwaves to be responsible, and that's what generated the Walter Cronkites of the world. But Google doesn't have to do that. Facebook, Apple doesn't have. There's nobody telling them what they have to do. It's up to them.
In fact, there are laws. There are laws protecting them. I'm going back to Section 230. I'm a lawyer. Everything looks like a hammer. Everything looks like a nail because I'm a hammer. There are laws that actually protect the ability to be quite selective in that. In a certain sense, very different than the nature of the broadcast rules of. Well,
the tradition of broadcast has changed when news became a profit center. At some point, because what I'm talking about is going back into the 60s and 70s. But you're absolutely right.
Should mention, by the way, as long as we're talking about journalism, that Brent Renaud, who was a filmmaker and journalist, Nieman Award winner, was shot by Russian troops at a checkpoint in Ukraine today and died. So there are still people who care a lot about journalism, who put their life on the line to bring us information and news that we can act as citizens of the world, so we can act responsibly. And those people are putting their lives on the line. They're really risking everything. So it's important. This stuff is very, very important, and we do need this information to be able to operate in the world. It's not just entertainment. Unfortunately, it looks a lot like entertainment if you watch television news, but it isn't. Mm-hmm. This information is stuff we need so that we can be better citizens.
And think about the diet that the Russians are getting. What they're getting right now is, if they're just watching television, is state-owned media, and how we don't want to go down that path. I mean,
that's right.
How much we honor these independent journalists.
That's right. Yeah. Let's take a little break. Sorry to be the bearer of those sad tidings, but that it underscores how important this job is. And it's maybe it shouldn't be left in the hands of Google or Apple or Microsoft or Twitter, but I don't know what another way to do this. I mean, clearly it wasn't much better to say, oh, the New York Times is the journal of record. They're the only people who matter. That wasn't it either. On balance, do you think we're better off the way it is now with 1,000 different sources, and it's up to the individual to kind of sift through them and make some sense of it? Carolina, are we better off with the news situation the way it is today?
You're asking me which kind of death I want to die, to be honest.
It's not perfect either way, I guess. Yeah.
No, it isn't really. But I really strongly believe that one voice is not the way.
Yeah. I think we are better off now. I really do. Do you agree, Larry?
I would if we could get a diet of accurate information. I think we're better off by having multiple opinions and multiple angles and multiple views. But I'm very upset about the fact that some people are getting false information or being lied to. And that's what's really bothering me. And that's always been true, but they were marginalized, and now they're getting it. And millions and millions of people are getting that. So I'm not going to give it I don't think it's an A or B. I mean, I don't want to go back to the old days, but I want to go to a point where people are getting accurate information, whatever that takes.
Well, and I think what Carolina and her husband are doing with their kid is the right thing to do, which is say, consider the source, try to find other sources, try to really vet it. The good news is I think their generation, your kids' generation, doesn't have that sense that my generation had as well. It was in the Times. It must be true. At least, which it wasn't. It was just another
wasn't always
view.
true.
It wasn't always true.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something to be said for that. Evan, you think we're better off with the news environment we have today?
I don't have any business answering that question with all the skilled journalists in this conversation. But what I would say, speaking from my domain of thought, is I love the principles that are embodied in the First Amendment. And, the challenge is making sure that those are done well. Free speech, the freedom of the press, the free establishment clause when it comes to how people express their spiritual lives, the right to peaceably assemble. I mean, that is the gasoline that powers the engine of democracy. And I don't know if I made that. I'm sure other people have said that. I'm not trying to be more dramatic about it than is necessary. But I mean, without those principles, we don't have much of a hope for peace and prosperity and all those things. Clearly, the challenge is just having it done well.
I agree with you. Have faith in the principles and act as best you can in that light. And yes, there will be problems. There is no perfect solution. But if your belief is in the free flow of information, the First Amendment, I think that's going to get us a lot farther than anything else is. So maybe that's why I like the situation as it is today. Yes, there's problems, but at least if you want to know something, you can find out.
Yeah.
And if you have something to say, you can say it. Larry, you and I grew up in an era where you had to go bang on doors and get somebody to let you say it.
Megaphone.
Get permission, right?
Yeah.
I remember trying to get my first job in radio and just going, pounding the pavement for months. But now you just do a podcast or start a blog.
I remember when I started my website, which obviously doesn't have gazillions of viewers. I remember saying to somebody, for the first time in my life, I'm a publisher. I'm not just a writer. I'm a publisher.
Yes.
I own the printing press.
I think in the long run, that's the right way. That's the way it should be in the long run. Yeah. Let's take a little break. Our show today brought to you by BetterHelp. There wouldn't be a better time for BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy that helps you take care of your most important relationship, the one you have with yourself. BetterHelp. You deserve to be happy. Maybe you're one of those people who will drop anything to go help somebody you care about. We go out of our way to treat other people well. You try to be a nice person, but are you doing the same for you? That's okay. It's okay to do that. Don't feel bad about that, whether it's hitting the gym or just, making time for a massage or even trying psychotherapy. You're your greatest asset. Invest the time and effort into yourself, just like you do for other people. Therapy there should not be a stigma. It is just looking to the resources that are out there to help you live a better life, whether it's a better relationship with your loved ones, whether it's a better relationship with the world, better focus, help you with anxiety. BetterHelp can really help. It's online therapy that offers video, phone, or even live chat sessions with your therapist. I think the reason they offer those variety of modalities is because sometimes you don't want to see somebody. You want to, or don't even want to talk to somebody. You want to type to somebody. Whatever, you communicate your way, and that's the beauty of this. Plus, it's much more affordable than in-person therapy. And because it's global, you don't have to use the therapist down the street. You know, there's a lot of reasons why you might want the privacy of using a therapist in another city or even another state. Plus, there are all kinds of modalities out there, all kinds of therapy. And at BetterHelp, you can find a therapist that works the way you want to work. You can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. I want to be clear, this is not crisis help. There are, call a crisis line if you're having a current crisis. But if you're looking at long-term psychotherapy just to help you have a better life, this is a great way to do it. No matter where you are in your life, it is amazing. Give it a try. See why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. As we've been doing these ads, I've heard more and more stories from family members, listeners who say, you know what, this was great. I'm so glad I did this. You can message anytime with your therapist, which is really nice. It makes it very easy to schedule, and you're not limited to the therapists in your neck of the woods. Yes, they have group sessions even. I think groups sometimes is really valuable to see other people experiencing the same issues you are. BetterHelp.com/twit. Find out more. You'll get 10% off your first month. BetterHelp, BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/twit. Affordable, private therapy, anytime, anywhere. Phone, video, live chat. I think this is really, now's the time. We need it. BetterHelp.com/twit. Couldn't recommend it more highly. It's very, very important. All right. Let's move on. Maybe if I could find something a little more fun. No. Although I have to say, I'm very interested in what Amazon's doing. Clubhouse was all the rage. Remember a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago? Yeah. And that's kind of faded. Amazon has decided to do a Clubhouse competitor, but I think they're going to do it better. They call it AMP. It is now opening up. You still have to get an invite. But the idea is you can play music. They have deals with all the record labels. You have tens of millions of licensed songs. So you could be a DJ if you want. You could take phone calls if you want. And it all works through an app. iOS right now only in the US, but they plan to expand it to Android and the rest of the world. You can download AMP from the App Store, sign up to get on the wait list. I think this is very interesting. You know, I'm sort of focused on this because this is the space I work in. And I look at Spotify's trying to own this space and Apple and Facebook. And now here's Amazon. They have a very interesting play on this. Amazon AMP.
I wonder why they didn't call it radio, because it is,
isn't it?
Like radio.
It's radio on the internet.
Amazing concept.
What's funny is the rules, which seem complicated, are exactly the same rules you have on the radio. So they obviously have the same kind of licensing deals with the record labels. You could play 2 songs from the same album or 3 songs from the same artist in any 3-hour window. You can't repeat songs in that time frame. I just went through these rules in broadcast. We have to do these classes every year to make sure we're adhering to the rules. And that's exactly the same deal that the record labels have the broadcasters. So it is really kind of like radio. You can't focus on taking song requests. You can't play any songs from outside the library unless you have the right to do so. It's audio. I feel like this is going to be a very strong contender and a lot more interesting, frankly, than Clubhouse.
You know, I grew up at a time when DJs were really important, right? And every major city had its DJ, and just about every teenager was enamored with that DJ. And if we could get back to that point, that would be kind of exciting. And you know, why not do it on the app? I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a resurgence of great DJs. And I don't mean DJs like in the concert. I mean people who actually talk and
put together segues, put together lists of songs that relate.
Maybe do
absolutely.
some news.
Get some news in there.
Hey, Leo, you and I could get a job as to do the 5-minute news on some of these radio shows.
We don't need
right?
see, Larry, you're still in the old school way of thinking. You don't need a job anymore. You just do this.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You don't need a boss.
Don't even need money anymore.
Don't even need money anymore. Just need a phone. It's pretty. I mean, I think in the long run, this is all very good. You know, that anybody who wants to do this can. My son has become a TikTok star. He doesn't. I like it because he doesn't use the Laporte name, so it's not. You know, he's not playing.
You're proud, but at a distance.
No, I just don't. He's making it on his own. He's Salt Hank. You go to salthank.com and he does these TikTok cooking videos. He sells salt. By the way, I'll give him a little plug. The new salts are in. Just added chimichurri. Truffle garlic's my favorite. And they just got a whole bunch of more in stock. So if you're in the mood for salt. But this is a perfect example. This kid grew up. He's 27 now. He grew up watching YouTube cooking videos. Said, that's what I want to do. I said, because I'm an old guy, son, get a real job.
Right.
Listen to me and Larry Magid. Get a real job, son. And he said, no, I want to do these cooking videos. And he started doing them on TikTok. And now he's got almost 2 million followers on TikTok. And he's got a sponsor who's, you know, a clothing sponsor who's, I think, pretty much guaranteeing him a salary for the next year. And it's kind of amazing.
Okay, Leo, I demand equal time. My son, willmagid.com.
Yes.
Also Balkan Bump, which is the name he plays under. I told him to get his master's degree so he could teach music. And he said, Dad, I want to go out and perform. And of course, that was a crazy idea. Well, 2 Super Bowl commercials later and a successful concert career.
Wait a minute. He's been on a Super Bowl commercial?
2 of them. His music has been licensed by Porsche for their electric car commercials
awesome.
2 years in a row. I mean, he's always on tour.
Also not using the, he's using the Magid name.
Well, he uses the Magid name, but he actually performs a lot under the name Balkan Bump, which I also thought was a crazy idea. Why would you create another brand?
Oh, I thought Salt Hank was insane. Yeah.
You know, and I argued with him, but I was on a plane from Frankfurt to Paris, and I was telling this guy from LA about my son because he performed. He said, oh, and he'd never heard of him. And then I said, oh, yeah, and he plays under the name Balkan Bump. He says, you're kidding. Your son is Balkan Bump. So,
I get that too. Isn't that
maybe
cool?
because it wasn't my last name.
Isn't that cool?
I don't know.
So he plays the trumpet.
Yep, he does. And he's also a DJ. And, you know.
And it's world music. He's obviously influenced by world music.
Yeah, he studied ethnomusicology and he does a lot of world music. He started out in West Africa, but now he's doing a lot around the Balkans. And, you know, the only problem is I can't even get him to perform at my parties because he's too busy. I don't know if I can afford him.
He'll be performing at the Nectar Lounge in Seattle, Washington on Friday, Eugene, Oregon at the Big Dirty Saturday, following Friday, Santa Barbara at the Lucidity Festival. He's playing the Fox in
Headlining
Oakland.
Fox on Saturday.
That's a huge one.
Yep.
Wow, look at this guy.
Does he have a Midwest tour coming up?
He did Chicago recently. Yeah, he's always doing.
You know what's hysterical is if you said to a kid 10 years ago, you should play the trumpet. That's going to be the next big thing.
All right.
He would have laughed. But that's what I like about our kids. And Carolina's too. They're themselves. And that's, I think, a little bit different. I think you don't have the days of, you go to college, you get a degree, you get recruited by DuPont, you work there 50 years, you get the gold watch, you're retired. Those days are long gone.
Long gone.
Thank goodness.
Don't say that because we're still convincing them that they should go to college, but we might.
Now, they're in high school now, or are they college age, or?
They're 14, so they will
very
go
young
to,
still.
to high school.
Yeah.
No.
I'm hoping, to be honest with you, by the time they're out of a high school, that college will not matter in the same way as it has in the past, right? So that you've seen in tech people understanding that maybe they need to use other criteria to choose who's a good candidate and who isn't, right? And looking more at skills and ability versus what you get out of a test score.
I think it's good to go to college if you don't get in crushing debt as a result.
Absolutely. That's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just certain colleges that open door, but it's really
it's opening your mind more than opening the doors. It's really learning about the world around you.
And it's not just what you learn. I mean, a lot of my son's collaborators are people he met in college.
Right.
And that's how he got his start in professional music, by collaborating with fellow students and faculty and others. And when I think back to my days at Berkeley, a gazillion years ago, it wasn't what I learned, but who I hung out with that had such a huge impact on my life.
I think that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
True.
It's a social experience. So we're all in favor of going to college. Don't think we're not.
Especially for Carolina's kids.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Although it's funny.
I will call you up and you'll help me with that.
I'm watching the Dropout, which is the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos story. Yeah. Great show. She drops out of Stanford sophomore year because she's going to make this thing that will never work. And they said, what are you dropping out of college? Her parents probably. What are you dropping out of college? She said, Bill Gates dropped out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Larry Ellison dropped out of college. Leo Laporte dropped. No, she did not say that, but she could have. Probably doesn't matter as much as it used to. But on the other hand, I think that's from the outside world. But from the inside, the stuff the experiences you have, the things you learn. And you'll never be a lawyer like Evan if you don't go to college, right? You got to go to college for that.
That's right.
Biden signs an executive order that the crypto community is saying is very good for crypto. He's saying that government agencies need to kind of pay attention to this. It emphasizes the government's commitment to ensuring that virtual assets are developed responsibly and ensuring responsible development of digital assets. It's even in the title. And talks about developing a digital dollar, which is kind of interesting. I think the crypto community is both happy and upset about this. So on the one hand, a lot of people in the crypto community say the whole point of this is no government involvement. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think there's so much uncertainty. Is it taxable? Is it an asset? Is it security? That they just want some feedback from government about what it is. And I think the notion of a digital dollar is intriguing to some, not probably the Bitcoin bros, but intriguing to some.
Isn't PayPal a digital dollar? I mean, what is a digital dollar?
Well, your MasterCard is a digital dollar.
Yeah, MasterCard.
I mean, when's the honestly, these days it's rare that we handle currency.
Right.
Apple Cash.
Yeah, that's digital.
I write maybe 2 checks a year at that, if that. I never write checks anymore.
Well, I found out in Georgia, a lot of people write checks still and want checks. Otherwise, you're gonna. Oh yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, the whole house experience has been interesting, and the amount of fees actually that you are charged if you're using digital payments, and it's not just Amex; it's any credit card has a fee associated with it. It is quite fascinating, but all that said, I also got an email on, I think it was Friday or yesterday, from Rooms to Go, who now will accept crypto payments. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do in life: go and buy a new sofa and use crypto
and use a cryptocurrency that you don't know what it's worth tomorrow. Could go up, could go down. It's risky.
I have my sofa.
Yeah. Did you actually buy a sofa using crypto?
No.
For a little while,
but now you have the option.
They took that away.
Yeah, Tesla decided not to do that. It's really we're what this show is all about is the brave new world that we're living in. It is it's remarkable. Moderna, which developed, of course, one of the 2 most popular mRNA vaccines against COVID, has said mRNA is the future messenger RNA, and we're going to develop mRNA vaccines for 15 of the world's worst diseases. They're already working on HIV. In fact, I think they're already in trials on an HIV vaccine.
Wow.
They also want to develop vaccines against, I hope I'm not pronouncing this wrong, chikungunya. I'm not familiar with that. Dengue, I know. Ebola, malaria. A malaria vaccine would be huge.
Wow.
Mideast respiratory syndrome. And this is really a technology story because mRNA vaccines were developed I mean, they've been working on them for more than a decade, scientists have, but the vaccine for COVID was developed after sequencing the COVID gene in a weekend and then developing a vaccine computationally from it. Testing is what took a long time, almost a year. So the technology, though, is now much better understood. Scientists at the University of Pennsylvania were able to create mRNA that could get past the cell's defenses without triggering an immune response, but still recognized by the ribosome. In the case of COVID vaccines, the modified RNA was programmed to get the ribosome to make the spike protein, and then your immune system was awakened and trained and responded. So it's kind of a Trojan horse delivery vehicle to get past the cell's defenses and then say, hey, you ought to know, here it comes, and you better be prepared. It's also has another benefit. Unlike many vaccines, it's easy to scale in production at a relatively low cost. Doesn't require chicken eggs, things like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Leo, we certainly can't look past the polarizing nature of vaccination. So not only is this a technology story, but it's sort of an information, and misinformation story.
Well, I'm sure people are hearing this, and I know some people who are hearing this going, "Oh no, Bill Gates is not putting a needle in my arm."
Yeah.
Moderna is building a $500 million facility for manufacturing mRNA vaccines in Kenya, so that it can supply up to 500 million doses a year of those vaccines to the African continent. I think it could change the world. It could change global health.
What's interesting, is for every anti-vaxxer, there are so many people who are just can't wait. I mean, when you're reading this story, I'm so excited. I was hoping you would mention some diseases that I'm worried about getting. But the point is,
there is a lot of research about cancer because, the big problem with our current cancer treatments is they kill everything around the cancer, whether it's radiation or chemo. They're poisonous. They're very deadly. And a targeted vaccine targeted to the genome of the specific cancer organism you've got, it could potentially transform how we treat cancer. So all of that is on the horizon. I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And you know what? Darwin will win in the long run.
Exactly.
If you're against it, that's fine. Don't get the vaccine.
The only reason I actually have any problem with it is when you're talking about a communicable disease.
Well, that's right.
Your failure to take the vaccine
is
affecting you. My health.
Yeah.
But if it's cancer, and as far as we know, cancer isn't contagious, take it, don't take it. That's your problem.
Yeah.
But when it came to
be sensitive to the larger issue. I mean, we can't be dismissive. This again there's a theme here of the variety of viewpoints here. I mean, one may think that it's baffling why this is a polarizing issue, and one may see very clearly, but if we don't want to have a continuation of the trench warfare of information that's been going on the last couple of years, we've got to find more meaningful ways to make information.
And it happens in a lot of realms. I mean, there are those who think GMOs are hazardous and want to stop it cold, and there are those who see GMOs as the future of food delivery in the world. I mean, it's. I think, though, in the long run, these discussions are fine and appropriate, but in the long run, I think the benefits outweigh the negatives. But we'll see.
Oh, yeah.
And they're facts, right? There's science. We can go and see the data.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ford is going to ship and sell vehicles that are missing chips. Apparently, GM's been doing this too. We had the story a couple of weeks ago that GM was going to start selling trucks without seat warmers because they couldn't get the chips to control the seat warmers. Ford is going to start doing this too, vehicles without rear heating or air conditioning controls. And then when the semiconductors become more available, the dealer will get them and you'll have to go in and get them installed. So they're actually building these vehicles with like a socket waiting for the rest of the parts.
I have to say, I read the title and I was like, what? Maybe it would have helped if it non-critical parts, right?
But that's what's so interesting. The chip shortage.
Warmer.
Yeah, it's not just, the flagship CPUs or GPUs. The chip shortage affects really, and maybe even worse, these little legacy nodes, these small factories that are, they're entirely responsible for the seat-warming semiconductor. Wireless charging, HD radios, a fuel management module. Tesla sold some cars without USB ports, but made them installable at a later date. Cadillac.
Well, that's why Apple was able to have more on the Mac.
That's right. Thank goodness, right? No, you're not. You're kidding, but it's true. Apple, with its huge buying power, went to TSMC and bought up all the capacity. So you're not actually, I mean, I don't know if you're wrong specifically. I don't think we can blame Apple for no USB ports in the Tesla, but certainly Apple, because of its clout, was able to buy up all the chip production. BMW began shipping some cars without touch screens. Cadillac.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
That's
Cadillac
serious.
nixed its hands-free driving.
How do you drive a car without a touchscreen? Is that possible?
Use knobs
Wow.
like an animal.
How did you do that?
Dials, buttons. All right, let me take one more break. Then we can get a few more stories in and wrap it up. I am a fan of this panel. Carolina Milanese, so nice to have you here. What's for dinner tonight? Just curious, I might come over.
Well, given that we're finishing at 8:30, I'm afraid the kid is on their own. And so
no.
I don't know what they're
Hamburgers.
cooking.
Hamburgers. That's it. I know. It's great to have you. Of course, Larry Magid, my old friend, connectsafely.org, at Larry Magid on Twitter. And a longtime friend of the network, former co-host of This Week in Law, Evan Brown from evan.law. Good to have all three of you. Our show today brought to you by Mint Mobile. I hear so many horror stories about people who have cell phone service with the big three. And I just want to say, just get Mint Mobile. Get Mint Mobile. What's your cell bill? Seriously, with Verizon or AT&T or Sprint. It's $80, $90, $90, $100. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2022, don't delay. You should switch to Mint Mobile. It's the easiest way to save this year. They're the first company to sell premium wireless service online only. Don't look for a Mint Mobile store. There isn't one. Just go to mintmobile.com/twit and maximize your savings. Plans at Mint Mobile start at $15 a month. Oh, Leo, what could you get for $15 a month? Well, you could get unlimited talk, unlimited text nationwide, and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. $15 a month. Why pay for data you're not going to use? I think that's a 2 gig plan. You can get more, but it's always a lot less. By going online only and eliminating the traditional costs of retail, Mint Mobile passes significant savings on to you. And they don't nickel and dime you with hidden fees. You can even get the SIM for free. They'll send you a SIM, put it in your existing phone. If you want, port your phone number over. All your contacts go with it. It's just the right way to go. With Mint Mobile, you choose the amount of monthly data that's right for you, and you stop paying for data you never use. If you want, they do have an unlimited plan. It's like, why are we paying more? Switch to Mint Mobile. Get premium wireless service starting at $15 a month. And they're running on the T-Mobile network. And I have to say, by the way, the T-Mobile Ultra Capacity 5G that we get now here in Petaluma, and I think around most of the country, I saw 500 megabits down, 30 megabits up. I've changed my tune on 5G. So get a 5G phone, get the deal. You get the 5G with Mint Mobile, mintmobile.com/twit. mintmobile.com/twit. Not everybody's got Ryan Reynolds as a spokesperson and owner. Get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free. mintmobile.com/twit. $15 a month. Roberto says, I have the unlimited plan on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. You like it, Roberto? He's in New York. Works well for you, right? It's a great solution. Thank you, Mint Mobile. Thank you. We had a great week on the network this week, so much so that I've commissioned the editors to prepare this short film for you. Enjoy.
I'm Jason Howell. It's also your weekly source for the latest people in real life sitting next to me. Like me, I'm Ron Richards, and I'm here in the studio.
Woo! And I don't get to be in the studio, but I'm still here.
There's a space at the table for you, Win.
Someday we'll figure that. We'll coordinate that. We looked up before the show started. The last time I was here was December 2018.
Previously on Twit. Twit News.
They have blown it out of the park, I think. Very impressive pricing, I think. Competitive. But more interesting, they found a way to take the existing M1s and make them even more pro with the M1 Ultra. I think what they offered was their replacement for the iMac Pro.
Floss Weekly.
This week, Jonathan Bennett and I talked to Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder and alpha dude at WordPress, which is what he calls on the show the dark matter of the web.
Security Now.
Russian authorities are drafting a set of measures to support the country's economy against the pressure of foreign sanctions. And as part of this, the proposal would eliminate intellectual property right limitations in order to explicitly permit piracy within Russia.
Twit. It's where your brain and tech meet.
In a collision of spectacular proportion. The sad story of the week. Facebook's parent company will make employees do their own laundry. Oh. All the big tech companies are making employees come back next week or month. Meta told workers on Friday it will reduce or eliminate some of its famous perks as it brings people back to the office. A story in the New York Times by Mike Isaac. I love it. They also did some sneaky things, cutting back or eliminating free services like laundry and dry cleaning. Okay, fine. You know, we don't do our employees' laundry either. They had a free dinner, free meal. It used to be at 6 p.m. It's now 6:30. Now you might say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the last shuttle home leaves at 6.
Tricky.
So apparently,
go home and cook your own dinner.
Yeah, apparently what workers were doing is they were running over, making giant to-go boxes and getting on the bus and going home. Won't be able to do that anymore. Come on, Meta.
We're laughing about this, but you can't have your cake and eat it too, and ask people to come back. And for a lot of employees, especially, Gen Zers and millennial, going back to campus means going back to some of the perks, right? That make a difference when those perks were part of the reason why maybe your salary wasn't as high as somebody else's, right? And now you're taking stuff away and you're asking me to come in and commute and have longer days or have higher, cost if I'm driving my own car or whatever the case might be. Something's got to give.
I agree. It's hard to get people to come back to work. Facebook says they want everybody coming back March 28th. But to say at the same time, but don't worry, you're not going to get any food or dry cleaning. The Great Resignation is not over.
Nope.
And especially in the tech industry, it's very fluid. Would you quit a job because there were fewer beans in the bean bag? I don't know. But it seems like a bad time to do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I saw, and I can't remember who it was, but it was the talent manager from a tech company who said on Twitter that every time they see a company saying that they're forcing people back, their headhunters are hitting up those employees.
Yeah.
Because he knows that forcing people back right now is not, it's not the thing to do.
Like Mike Isaac's final line in this article, one employee, when reached for comment on the changes, texted, "I can't talk, I'm doing my laundry." By the way, Mike, congratulations. His book, Super Pumped, is now an HBO series on Travis Kalanick. And have any of you watched Super Pumped yet?
No.
Because I'm curious because, we covered the story as it was happening. But so it's kind of interesting to see. I think it's well done. That and Dropout show that there's a lot of interest in how Silicon Valley works. and the cutthroat kind of culture of Silicon Valley is very much highlighted in these. Twitter's looking for younger users, so they've hired a Ute, the tech world's teen savant, Josh Robinson. He's an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Connecticut, and I'm sorry, that's not who they hired. That's the lead in the article. They hired Michael Saman. He's a prodigy in Silicon Valley when it comes to building products for young people. He dropped out of high school at age 17, recruited by Mark Zuckerberg to work for Facebook. At Facebook, he helped the platform build out and launch products like the Snapchat killer Instagram Stories. He left Facebook in 2017. He worked there on YouTube Shorts, which basically was YouTube's attempted TikTok killer. I don't think it succeeded yet. Then he went to Roblox in 2020 to help the gaming platform incorporate more social functionality. Sounds like he is the wunderkind. He will be working on, at Twitter, something called 01, a new group focused on building experimental features within the company. Can you get young people to use Twitter? Probably not.
Only if you can have the reverse chronological timeline.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for turning that off. It's still in there, but Twitter has made it harder to, I mean, look, that's how I want to see Twitter, right?
Yep.
In fact, I hate it. I'll open Twitter and I get something for 3 days ago.
Yeah.
That's not what I want to see. So the design change, which lets you swipe between your home, which is the algorithmic non-chronological timeline, and the latest, which is the chronological timeline, was announced Thursday. To set it up, you tap. I'll have to try this. Tap the sparkle icon. Oh, God. I guess it's better than the hamburger menu. You tap the sparkle icon in the top right corner. The option to pin your latest timeline. If you select that, you'll see both home and latest tabs at the top of the iOS app. If you used pin lists on the iOS app, that layout should look familiar. The feature is available right now on iOS, coming soon to Android and the web. So that sounds like it's easier. Or no, it's harder. Because, okay, so this is why it's harder, according to Jay Peters writing for The Verge. To my great disappointment, I found that after testing the feature, I can't make the chronological feed the default anymore. Ooh.
Yeah.
Instead, I can only have home as my default or swap back and forth between the two. Ah, yeah, of course, Twitter, like YouTube and Facebook, they want to algorithmically control what tweets you're seeing because they think it makes it better. You don't agree, Evan?
Well, I just get nostalgic and think of what it was like using Twitter in 2007, you know.
In the good old days.
So, yeah.
2007, those were the days.
Yeah.
Your timeline shows the latest tweets. So don't do it. So if right now I'm seeing the latest tweets, I don't change it because then you can continue to see the latest tweets, I guess. I don't know. This is why a third-party app. I still use TweetDeck, which the latest tweets, scrolls, much better.
Actually, TweetDeck is owned by Twitter, isn't it?
I know. And I keep waiting for them to pull the plug because maybe they think nobody uses it.
I use it.
The most severe vulnerability in Linux in years, dirty pipe. Just be aware of it. It's a privilege escalation exploit, which means somebody can basically become root on your machine without your permission if they have a login. I think it's probably been fixed on most versions of Linux. The real problem is these older systems like our server over here that don't get updated as often. It first appeared in Linux kernel version 5.8. It is fixed with 5.16.11 or 5.15.25 or 5.10.102. So just to be aware, unfortunately, Android runs on Linux, and many Android versions are running on a vulnerable version. So heads up. LimeWire is making a comeback. You ready? Remember LimeWire? Unfortunately, it's a music NFT marketplace, so don't Don't get your hopes up. And prepare yourself, John. I know you're prepared for a massive coronal mass ejection, a long duration C2 solar flare. I'm just going to read this from Space Weather. A long-duration C2 solar flare launched an asymmetrical full-halo coronal mass ejection into space. The solar plasma cloud is likely to arrive at Earth later tonight. Minor G1 geomagnetic storm conditions are likely, with a chance of moderate G2 conditions. So prepare yourself.
I have no idea what you just said.
I don't know either. Basically, I guess, it's a tweet. Basically, there it is, by the way. You want to see a coronal mass ejection. That's a coronal mass ejection, man. Oof. I think it means mostly really nice northern lights tonight. I think mostly is what it means. Huh. If you're a ham, you know what to do. I don't think it's going to affect our technology. It's good in theory, right?
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, nothing. Just wanted you to warn you to prepare yourself, and it could happen. Boy, that means we're scraping the bottom of the barrel if we've gotten to space weather. So I think it's time to say, everybody, go have a nice dinner. Carolina Milanese, thanks for staying up late with us. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you. Founder of the Heart of Tech. If you want to put some heart back into your business, a consultancy that helps you do the right thing. And of course, she is an analyst at Creative Strategies, at Creative Strat. Anything you want to plug, Carolina? This is your chance.
I'm on Twitter if you want to, reach out and
hit me up is what the kids say. Hit me up.
Pretty much. Yeah. You get bonuses of 3 cats and a dog that always show up on my feed. So it's not just tech. And then experimenting more and more on Instagram. On both places, you can find me at Caro_Milanese, as you can see on the screen. Nice. And and the kid is grateful that I am not attempted TikTok because they're embarrassed enough as it is.
Do they TikTok? Do they have a TikTok?
No, they follow people. They're not really into creating content for TikTok. They're more on the YouTube side.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. Thank you very much, Larry Magid, for being here. Appreciate it. It's always great to see you. Anything you'd like to plug besides, of course, connectsafely.org?
Well, yeah, I would say for those of you who aren't glued to terrestrial radio and want to hear my CBS program, you can go to Connect Safely and click on the radio tab or in the podcast, webcast radio. It's only 1 minute long, and I get to interview some kind of cool people, even in 1 minute. It's kind of a tweet on the air, so to speak.
Yeah, sometimes short format's not so bad.
Yeah.
Make it really
forces
quick.
You to be doing. And by the way, when I say 1 minute, it is never 1.1 minutes. It is never 59 seconds. It is one. It's really hard.
You don't have to do 59.9.
Yeah, I might go with 59.9, but I wouldn't go with 60.1. Because the stations might dump out.
I just got something I've always, anybody who's worked in radio used to carry a cassette player over your shoulder, big heavy thing, and then
Marantz,
yeah, remember the Marantzes? Yes, always carried those around. Loved those. Yep. And then eventually went solid state, and it was like a little mini, like a little smaller. I just got this from Zoom. This is their Zoom F3 field recorder. Look at this. You could carry it in your pocket. It has a mic, 2 mic, so you could actually have 2 mics.
XLR, wow.
XLR. So you could do this is perfect for radio. And it does something I'm learning about called 32-bit float. I'm sorry, is that right? Yeah, 32-bit float recording, which means you can't overdrive it. You can overdrive the mic, but you could have a loud noise, a quiet noise, whatever, and you can fix it in post. So I'm going to, if I come up to you and I got a microphone and you can't see what's on the other end, it's probably in my pocket. I could do it.
What's nice about that, you can use any of your analog mics, right?
Yeah,
it's a like an SM58. You got
this
there?
Is an well, actually, this is a SM58 clone from a company called Pile.
Okay,
it sounds really good. But yeah, you can just use a handheld mic with a mic flag. I'm excited. It's funny.
How do you get?
I think I'm still in radio. I'm not, but I think I'm still in radio. So like, I could go to CES and say, Larry Magid, CBS Radio News. What do you think?
I don't know.
That's it.
I think that's a nice microphone.
Yeah.
You know what I would think is, why aren't you doing this? Because everybody now uses
a phone. This is better. This is better. I could get 99.
I'm sure it is.
0.99 hours on this. Evan Brown, evan.law. Give us a plug.
Well, that's it. Go there, read my blog, tell your friends about it. Although on the right-hand side is my Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So would love to connect. And I've just had a great time this afternoon. Thank you for having me, Larry. Nice to meet you. I've followed your work for years and years, and wonderful to be in the same context here. Carolina, very nice to meet you. So intrigued to learn about you and the important things you're doing. So
I would shake your hand,
hang
but
out.
be scratched by screen. So
thanks for being here, Evan. I actually should plug Carolina's interview with Justine and Jenna in Forbes, "The Power of Knowing You Belong," because we're big fans, and Justine was
they are very good people.
Was a discovery Alex Lindsay made in Pittsburgh at a WordPress convention. He came to me and said, "You've got to meet this person. She's going to be huge." Said 2008, 2009, something like that. And she's been on our show many times. She's too big now for us, so we can't get her anymore. So that's a great article. I can't wait to read it. Forbes. Thank you, everybody. We do Twit every Sunday evening, around 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. Yes, we sprang forward today. Aren't you glad that I didn't go on and on about what a horrible idea it is to change the clocks twice a year? I just left that out. But now that we're in daylight saving time, you'll have to adjust because we moved. You may not have. In fact, around the rest of the world, they haven't yet. In many cases, they're not yet on summertime, but we are on summertime. So that means I'm just going to tell you UTC, and you could do the calculations. 21:30 UTC on a Sunday afternoon. After the fact, you can get on-demand versions of the show at the website, twit.tv. There's a YouTube channel for This Week in Tech, the longest-running technology news show in the world. You can also, since 2005, you can also subscribe in your favorite podcast client and get it automatically. If you don't like ads, we do have an ad-free version I should tell you about. All you have to do is subscribe to Club Twit, $7 a month, ad-free audio or video of everything. Nope, that's the wrong one. Audio and video for everything that we do. There you go. And you get access to the great Club Twit Discord, which is a wonderful place for discussions. In fact, we have some events coming up. Paul Thurrott's going to do an event, inside Twit-style event. Patrick Delahanty did his yesterday, day before. No, it's coming up this week. Our engineer, if you want to see some of the people behind the scenes, we're going to start doing those. We have Stacey Higginbotham's Club Twit Book Club on March 24th. Cory Doctorow's Unauthorized Bread. Paul's will be on March 31st. So those Discord discussions are lots of fun. Plus, you get the Twit Plus feed, which is loaded with content that doesn't make it to the podcasts. We also use the revenue from Club Twit to help us launch new shows. We just launched This Week in Space, started in the club. It's now available to the public at twit.tv/twist. So a lot of good stuff. Thank you to our Club Twit members. We appreciate each and every one of you. Twit.tv/clubtwit if you want to join the club. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Another Twit is in the can. Bye-bye. Doing the Twit.